Chapter 1070, Entering the Yang Spirit. Chapter 1070, Entering the Yang Spirit. Suzimo still had many questions in his mind after that exchange. However, at the very least, some of his doubts were resolved. The identity of the woman beneath the ruins. Furthermore, he finally knew who was the one who killed the cultivators, an even conjoint body mighty figure, who entered the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley to investigate for the past 10,000 years. The methods of that great Shin advisor were truly terrifying. Not only could he hide from the senses of Monk Yuan Bei and the red-headed ghost, he could even kill in silence right under their noses. Of course, what delighted Suzimo more was that he understood more about Daiyu. Daiyu did not stay at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley for long. However, what she did had a huge impact on the three of them. There was no need to elaborate on her impact on Suzimo. If Daiyu had not stepped in, Monk Yuan Bei and the red-headed ghost might not have been able to escape from the great Shin advisor's schemes. Both of them would have been kept in the dark. The appearance of the great Shin advisor made the two of them realize that they were merely chess pieces that were manipulated in the catastrophe. Daiyu's attack was equivalent to releasing both of them at the same time. It was also after Daiyu killed the great Shin advisor that Ming Zhan could be saved by Monk Yuan Bei and brought to the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Otherwise, Ming Zhan would have been killed in silence by the great Shin advisor before Monk Yuan Bei even noticed his presence. "Lad, what are your plans next?" the red-headed ghost asked. Suzimo replied, "I'll be cultivating at the bottom of the valley for a period of time." The red-headed ghost nodded and said, "Yes, that's good as well. Don't worry, I've severely injured that D-clan's half-martial ancestor. It's already good enough that he survived. There's no way he can take revenge on you." Monk Yuan Bei said, "These sects and factions might not dare to lay their hands on you openly, but you have to be careful. Got it?" Suzimo nodded. From this day forth, he would cultivate at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley wholeheartedly. He went through the insights gained from the consecutive battles with many titular disciples, cultivated the Great Void Spirit Refinement section, chanted sutras and paid respects to Buddha as he accumulated and consolidated his experience. At the same time, in the Dragonbone Valley, an entire month passed and Suzimo woke up slowly in the cave of the primordial divine spring. Ever since he started cultivating, he had never had such a peaceful, comfortable, and relaxed sleep. He was truly too tired. Suzimo opened his eyes slowly and looked at the surging golden spring water beside him. He gradually snapped out of his stupor as he sensed the boundless vitality that surrounded his body. He finally realized where he was. Solitary Cloud was not by his side. He must have recovered from his injuries and left first. Splash! Suzimo stood up and looked down at his body. His body was completely intact. There were no injuries at all. The primordial divine spring was indeed powerful. Even his body that was devoid of life could be restored to its original state. Suzimo could clearly sense that every single move he made could release an incomparably terrifying power. With a single thought, he channeled his bloodline. Splash! The sound of a tsunami came from his body. This true body of the dragon race was even stronger than before. Suzimo was slightly stunned, as though he had realized something. In his consciousness, the injuries on the scarlet-haired Yin spirit had already healed. Not only that, he was shocked to discover that the Yin impurities on his essence spirit had vanished completely and were refined silently. There was an additional trace of pure Yang Qi on the essence spirit, the Yang spirit. Suzimo's eyes were filled with immense joy. In that 1 month, he merely slept in the primordial divine spring and his cultivation had already crossed a major realm to advance to the Yang spirit realm. According to the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, the Yang spirit realm corresponded to the void reversion realm. In other words, his true body of the dragon race had already entered the void reversion realm. To leap a major cultivation realm after a single sleep sounded like a fantasy. However, in reality, it was merely a matter of everything arriving at its course. Firstly, the scarlet-haired Yin spirit was already at its peak. If not for the fact that he was suppressed in the Tao inheritance ground, he would have broken through before the black-haired essence spirit. Secondly, Su Zimo slept in the primordial divine spring. Thanks to the nourishment of the primordial divine spring, the scarlet-haired spirit's injuries were healed and its boundless life force pushed forward. Naturally, it refined all the impurities in the essence spirit and entered the void reversion realm. Other cultivators would require a lot of preparation if they wanted to cross a major cultivation realm. Furthermore, there was a high chance of failure. However, given Su Zimo's Tao heart, it was impossible for him to fail his breakthrough in the primordial divine spring even if he was unconscious. The moment he woke up, not only did his true body of the dragon race recover, he had even entered the void reversion realm. Su Zimo was elated. He released his spirit consciousness slowly and pushed it to its limits. 500 kilometers. The moment he entered the void reversion realm, the range of his spirit consciousness had already exceeded 500 kilometers. A normal early-stage void reversion Tao being's spirit consciousness could only extend up to 50 kilometers. At the perfected void reversion realm, one could be considered as a paragon if they could reach 40 kilometers. However, the scarlet-haired spirit's spirit consciousness had already surpassed 500 kilometers. Have you heard? 2 outsiders joined the Illumination Dragon lineage a month ago. I heard that one of them is a WYRM and the other one isn't considered a dragon either. I heard that his bloodline isn't pure, and he seems to be a son accepted by an old elder of the Illumination Dragon lineage. Ever since that incident 10,000 years ago, the Illumination Dragon lineage has been getting worse. They're now even taking in WYRMs and dragons with impure bloodlines. After spreading his spirit consciousness, Su Zimo could naturally hear the gossip happening outside the cave. What's the use of taking them in? They will be tortured for as long as they stay in the dragon race. They won't be able to live for long if they don't recognize their circumstances. That's right. I heard that the WYRM was thrown to the side of the mixed dragon lineage and was beaten up all day. He's covered in injuries and won't be able to last much longer. At that point, Su Zimo frowned and his expression turned cold. The reason why he brought Solitary Cloud here was to obtain an opportunity for the latter, not to let him suffer. By the way, that long MO with the impure bloodline seems to be still soaking in the primordial divine spring. It's been a month, right? Fuck. I've been in the Dragon Bone Valley for so long, but I've never been to the primordial divine spring. How can a bastard with an impure bloodline like him enter? When he comes out, I'll definitely teach him a lesson. Hee, we won't even get our turn. The brothers from the Illumination Dragon lineage can't wait any longer and have been waiting for this Long Mo to return. Do you think that Long Mo is hiding in the primordial divine spring the entire time and doesn't dare to come out because he knows he's going to be walloped real hard? It's highly possible. Just as the few dragons were discussing, a voice sounded from behind them. Everyone, may I check with you the directions to the mixed dragon lineage region? The few dragons turned back and saw a scarlet-haired man standing on them. He had refined features and asked expressionlessly. Over there, a dragon pointed instinctively. Thank you. The scarlet-haired man expressed his thanks and turned to leave. Before long, he disappeared from everyone's sight. That person didn't look familiar at all, right? Scarlet hair. He should be from the Illumination Dragon lineage, but I haven't seen him before. Could it be Long Mo? It must be him. Let's go take a look. Many dragons followed hurriedly. Chapter 1071. Who did you say have a death wish? Chapter 1071. Who did you say have a death wish? Within the main hall of the Illumination Dragon lineage. 3 elders of the Illumination Dragon lineage were sitting inside when an old man walked in. It was Elder 4. There's news from the primordial divine spring that Long Mo has just woken up and his injuries have healed. Furthermore, he's already at the void reversion realm. Elder 4 said in a deep voice, I heard that this lad has already headed to the mixed dragon lineage region. Where's Long Chio and the others? Elder 3 asked. Elder 4 said, They've already brought people over in an aggressive manner. They must have gone to kill Long Emo. The four elders exchanged glances. We'll find out soon enough whether he's a dragon or a worm, the Grand Elder said with a smile. The mixed dragon lineage had an extremely low status in the dragon race. Although they retained a spot in the Dragon Bone Valley, they occupied a small area. Furthermore, the dragons of the mixed dragon lineage had many restrictions in the Dragon Bone Valley. They could not go anywhere and were mostly slaves among the 5 dragon lineages. The lower the level, the more chaotic it was. Among the 5 lineages of the dragon race, fights between fellow clansmen could happen at any moment. This was even more common among the mixed dragon lineage. Although the area was small, there were many dragons with thin bloodlines living in it. Gradually, 4 major factions were formed: Rain, Cloud, Coiling, and Flood Dragon. Battles often broke out between the 4 factions. However, there were much fewer fights between the 4 factions these days. It was because an outsider had appeared in their territory. Most importantly, this outsider had no right to step foot on this land. Even the Flood Dragon lineage could not accept this person. He was a WYRM and was far from an actual Flood Dragon. Although there was only a single word difference between the two, it was like the difference between heaven and earth. However, many of the dragons here heard that not only did this outsider step foot into this place, he even enjoyed the primordial divine spring that none of them were qualified to enjoy. This made many dragons even more displeased. Over the past few days, every single void reversion of the dragon race, be it from the Rain, Cloud, Coiling, or Flood Dragon lineages, would have someone teach that outsider a lesson and they would not get tired of it. Without strength, he was not qualified to live with them. A snake does not get to live together with dragons. That was the pride of the dragon race. In their eyes, the WYRM was a snake. Dragon lairs were built around a towering mountain peak. Every dragon lair was extremely spacious and tall, allowing the dragons to reside and cultivate. At that moment, there were many dragons gathered in front of a dragon lair. There were almost 100 people from the Cloud, Coiling, Rain, and Flood Dragon lineages. Whose turn is it to teach that person a lesson today? It's our Flood Dragon lineage's turn. I'll do it. A young man in white robes stood out. He had a strong physique and rubbed his palms together. With a smile on his face, he walked towards the dragon lair with a relaxed expression. Hey, be gentle. Don't kill him directly. There are still many people from our Cloud Dragon lineage waiting to train using him. Some dragons shouted as they laughed. Unknowingly, a scarlet-haired man had appeared in the crowd. He had refined features and a fair complexion. Hey. The scarlet-haired man patted the dragon on the shoulder and asked, if this WYRM is cultivating in the dragon lair, you guys won't be able to get him to come out, right? Although dragons could fight and kill at will, there were restrictions as well. If any dragon were to stay in their lair and cultivate, the other dragons could not disturb them. The other dragons could only challenge a dragon after he left his lair. Foo-foo. The dragon laughed. Brother, you're talking about the rules of our dragon race. However, that thing inside is a WYRM. What rights does he have to stay here? If he hides inside and doesn't come out, we'll naturally go in and drag him out. When he heard that, the scarlet-haired man was expressionless, but his gaze turned colder. When the dragon saw that this person looked unfamiliar, he wanted to ask. However, his aura weakened when he met with the person's gaze, and he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. It was a suppression that came from his bloodline. Someone from the Illumination Dragon lineage? When the dragon noticed the scarlet-haired man's hair, he frowned slightly and thought to himself, something's not right. He looks like he's from the Illumination Dragon lineage, but why does it feel like his bloodline is impure? Although he was puzzled, the dragon did not dare to ask. Standing beside the scarlet-haired man, he felt his heart palpitate as though a calamity was about to descend upon him at any moment. The scarlet-haired man was Suzimo. When he heard about Solitary Cloud's situation, he was puzzled. It was normal if Solitary Cloud was not strong enough to defeat the dragons here, since he had yet to transform into a proper dragon after all. However, as long as he cultivated in his lair continuously, he would naturally have a high chance of transforming into a dragon in this environment where the dragon chi was rich. How could Solitary Cloud suffer so badly? Upon hearing the dragon's reply, Suzimo finally understood that the dragons here did not give Solitary Cloud any chance to cultivate. Solitary Cloud was nothing but a plaything in their eyes. Solitary Cloud, get the hell out, the white-robed young man declared loudly. Don't think that you'll be safe just because you're hiding in the lair. You're a WYRM and don't deserve to live here. Go in and drag him out. Many dragons in the crowd cheered. Just as the white-robed young man was about to barge in, a figure gradually appeared from the darkness of the lair. It became clearer and staggered. When the figure stood at the entrance of the lair, Suzimo narrowed his eyes and his heart ached. It was Solitary Cloud. However, his appearance was almost indistinguishable. His cheeks were swollen and his facial features were contorted with wounds all over his body. Some of them had just formed scabs and his movements tugged at the wounds, causing fresh blood to flow out once more. Solitary Cloud looked wretched and miserable, covered in wounds. However, his eyes were filled with a hint of fearlessness, determination, and pride. Is it your turn today? The corner of Solitary Cloud's mouth twitched as though he wanted to laugh. The wounds on his face ruptured and fresh blood oozed out, looking somewhat menacing. Come on. His voice was hoarse and unpleasant. He let out a low growl from the depths of his throat, as though he was letting out an unyielding roar to all the dragons. The white-robed young man said indifferently, I'll pass on another message from the young master. As long as you agree to be the mount of our young master, our flood dragon lineage will naturally protect you. Absolutely impossible. Solitary Cloud said word by word without hesitation. Foo-foo. The white-robed young man sneered. Solitary Cloud, you're just a WYRM. Our young master is giving you face by accepting you as a mount. Don't seek a rebuff. Your young master is not worthy. Solitary Cloud grinned. You must have a death wish. The white-robed young man's expression darkened. In a flash, he appeared in front of Solitary Cloud and opened his gigantic palm to slap the latter's face. Solitary Cloud was in such a state that he could not even stand properly. He could not defend against that attack at all. All of a sudden, a breeze blew. A person appeared in front of Solitary Cloud. Piak. The white-robed young man's palm was held in that person's palm motionlessly. Who did you say have a death wish? The person looked at the white-robed young man calmly and asked. Chapter 1072, next. Chapter 1072, next. A series of exclamations sounded from the dragons. Nobody noticed how the scarlet-haired man appeared. The dragons were looking at the white-robed young man's palm, and just as it was about to land on Solitary Cloud's face, a figure had already appeared between the two of them. Furthermore, he grabbed the white-robed young man's wrist tightly. It's that dragon from earlier on. Among the dragons, someone recognized that this was the scarlet-haired man he had conversed with earlier on. The Illumination dragon lineage? I think so, but his bloodline isn't pure. It looks like he just broke through. A commotion broke out among the dragons. The white-robed young man's expression changed. Even he could not see clearly how the person appeared. Instinctively, he wanted to retract his arm. However, he realized that the person's palm was like a steel hoop that locked his wrist tightly and he could not move at all. Who are you? The white-robed young man asked sternly. All of a sudden, his expression changed as he cried out in pain. Suddenly, he felt that the intruder's palm was gradually exerting more strength. A sharp pain came from his wrist and his bones were about to be crushed. Answer my question. Who did you say have a death wish? Suzimo asked coldly. Kill. The white-robed young man endured the pain and let out a dragon roar from the depths of his throat. Swinging his other arm, he smashed towards Suzimo's head. Snap. Suzimo channeled strength into his palm. The white-robed young man's wrist was snapped. Thereafter, he raised his palm gently and it landed on the face of the white-robed young man, sending the latter flying dozens of feet away and tumbling in front of the group of dragons. The dragons were in an uproar. The white-robed young man's body was covered in dust, and his wrist was snapped. Half of his face had been ripped apart as well. He coughed out large mouthfuls of blood and fainted. With a single slap, the intruder severely injured a void reversion flood dragon. Who are you? I've seen all the void reversion dragons of the Illumination dragon lineage, but not you. Many dragons stood out and questioned Suzimo loudly with sharp gazes and murderous intent. If they were in the cultivation world and saw the white-robed young man suffering such a serious injury, the spectating cultivators would definitely be wary. However, this was a common sight among the dragons. A scene as such could not suppress the group of dragons at all. Master, you're here. Solitary Cloud looked at the back view in front of him and his heart lightened. Finally, he smiled and relaxed completely. He had only stayed in the primordial divine spring for less than 7 days. For the next 20 days, he endured the torture of the various dragons every day and did not have time to rest and cultivate at all. He was on the brink of a mental breakdown. If not for the fact that he missed Suzimo, he would have died long ago. At that moment, he relaxed completely when he saw Suzimo appear. Solitary Cloud knew that as long as Suzimo was here, even the 5 dragon lineages won't be able to hurt him, let alone the 4 dragon factions of the mixed dragon lineage. Suzimo's expression was indifferent in the face of the dragon's questions, and he ignored them completely. Turning around, he helped Solitary Cloud to the dragon's lair and sat down. Eat these elixirs. They'll help your injuries. Suzimo took out many bottles from his storage bag and placed them in Solitary Cloud's embrace. Suppressing the rage in his heart, he said softly, "Stay here and watch. I'll help you vent your anger." "All right." Solitary Cloud did not say much and nodded vigorously. "I know. You're the other outsider. You're Longimo of the Illumination dragon lineage." Right then, a young man of the coiling dragon lineage stood out from the group of dragons and pointed at Suzimo. "Your bloodline is impure, and you're not worthy of being in the same group as us." "So, that's Longimo. I heard that he joined under the recommendation from an old clan leader of the Illumination dragon lineage. He's not qualified at all." "That's right. How can an impure Illumination dragon enjoy the primordial divine spring?" "Longimo, I want to challenge you." The young man of the coiling dragon lineage shouted with a murderous gaze. Turning around, Suzimo surveyed his surroundings and nodded. All right, all right, all right. Come at me together. I'll take you all." He single-handedly challenged more than 100 dragons. Brazen. Insolent. The dragons sneered and scolded. The young man of the coiling dragon race sneered, "Foo-foo. Only one-on-one fights are allowed among dragons. You're trying to get us punished for violating the clan rules? Don't bother embarrassing yourself with such scheming methods." In the cultivation world, there were very few people of the same cultivation realm who dared to fight Suzimo alone. He was already used to fighting against many alone. To think that there would be such a rule in the dragon race. Of course, that was also the pride of the dragon race. "All right then." Suzimo nodded. "Next." The moment Suzimo said the word next, his figure flashed and he arrived before the young man of the coiling dragon lineage. Halfway through the word, Suzimo attacked. A punch landed heavily on the chest of the coiling dragon, whose eyes were filled with shock. Suzimo finished saying the word. By then, the young man from the coiling dragon lineage had already fallen far away. His chest was deeply caved in as he coughed out large mouthfuls of blood. "I'll do it." A young man from the rain dragon lineage stood out. Without another word, Suzimo strode forward and raised his palm. Opening his fingers, he crushed down towards the young man of the rain dragon lineage as though he could blot out the skies. An extremely tragic aura surged over. The young man from the rain dragon lineage felt suffocated by that aura. It's too terrifying. It's impossible to defend against. That was the only thought in the young man's mind. Instinctively, he propped up his arms. Bang! Suzimo's palm landed on the arms of the rain dragon. Snap! Without any pause, the sound of bones cracking could be heard. The arms of the young man from the rain dragon lineage were snapped into two and his broken bones were exposed, stained with fresh blood. It was a shocking sight. The momentum of Suzumo's palm was not completely diminished, and it landed on the head of the man, brushing against it gently. The young man from the rain dragon lineage fainted on the spot. Under the gazes of the dragons, Suzumo caused a rain dragon to faint just by pushing down and brushing his palm. Suzumo said indifferently, "Next. Kill." A young man from the cloud dragon lineage appeared and arrived before Suzumo. He reached out with both hands, and his sharp nails dug towards Suzumo's face. Suzumo's expression was unchanged as he ignored the young man's incoming fingernails and merely extended his palm to suppress the latter. A ruthless glint flashed through the eyes of the young man from the cloud dragon lineage. His fingernails were incomparably sharp, comparable to divine weapons, and could even penetrate divine stones. The fact that Long Mo was using his body to defend against his fingernails was akin to striking a stone with an egg. Crack, crack, crack. Before he could finish his thought, his fingernails had already been snapped by Suzumo's palm. The 10 fingers were connected to the heart. The young man from the cloud dragon lineage let out a tragic cry. In a flash, he turned into a gigantic cloud on the spot and vanished into it. That was the secret skill of the cloud dragon lineage. After releasing the cloud, their true bodies hid within and fused with the cloud. It was difficult for the other party to detect their true bodies. Suzumo did not retract his palm at all and plunged it into the cloud. Piak! A figure fell out of the clouds. It was the young man from the cloud dragon lineage. The flesh on his chest was blurry and his organs were shaken. He had fainted completely. Next. Suzumo's voice sounded coldly. Chapter 1073. Have your young master meet me. Chapter 1073. Have your young master meet me. Isn't that way too easy? The dragons gradually realized that Long Mo's strength might be more terrifying than they had imagined. The secret skill of the cloud dragon lineage, cloud confusion, was merely a decoration in Long Mo's eyes. Suzumo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. It was no exaggeration to say that even the legacy cultivation techniques of the primordial 9 races could not compare to it. Although there were no visual techniques in the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, his eyesight was so strong that he could see through most illusions. Furthermore, apart from the fact that Suzumo had cultivated the illumination dragon eye in this true body of the dragon race, he possessed the illumination stone in his right eye. Pitter-patter, pitter-patter. Without any warning, a dark cloud appeared above Suzumo's head, and it rained heavily. Like needles and swords, the raindrops fell towards Suzumo densely. A young man from the rain dragon lineage attacked. However, he did not fight Suzumo in close combat. Instead, he stood not far away and released the secret skill of the rain dragon lineage. Humph! Raising his head, Suzumo's eyes were clear as he faced the falling raindrops fearlessly. Suddenly, he shouted, "Disperse!" Boom! His voice was like thunder. The dark clouds hovering above Suzumo's head dissipated with a loud bang, and the pouring rain seemed to have sensed something as well as it dodged in fear. Not a single raindrop landed on Suzumo despite the heavy downpour. The dragons were shocked. Long Mo did not move at all and merely hollered. Yet, the secret skill of the rain dragon lineage vanished into thin air. What sort of powers were these? Was it a bloodline suppression? That was impossible. Even the 5 dragon lineages did not possess such a terrifying bloodline. Furthermore, Long Mo's bloodline was impure. How could there be such a phenomenon? The young man from the rain dragon lineage was stunned on the spot, and his mind went blank. Suzumo's expression was calm as usual. With one hand behind his back, he had already arrived in front of the other person as he extended his palm and pressed down. Bang! The body of the young man from the rain dragon lineage shuddered and his clothes were torn apart, revealing a gigantic palm print. He was sent flying and his tendons and bones were broken as he laid on the ground, unable to stand up. In reality, although Suzimo was furious, he was still rational. His attacks were not fatal. Apart from the Dragon Blood battlefield, killing in fights in other regions of the dragon race were not allowed. However, Suzimo's attacks were extremely heavy. Tendons and bones were ruptured at every turn. Even with the powerful bloodline of the dragon race, such injuries would take at least half a month to recover. For a moment, the dragons were stunned. However, Suzimo did not stop. As though he was strolling idly, he walked towards the group of dragons and extended his palm once more, suppressing a young man of the coiling dragon race. This time round, Suzimo was the one who took the initiative to attack. You! The young man from the coiling dragon race was enraged. Although he was stunned by Suzimo's methods, he could not withstand such provocation. Suddenly, the young man from the coiling dragon lineage opened his mouth and spat out a black mist. The mist carried a strong stench and produced a hissing sound the moment it was exposed. The spirit chi in the void was corroded by the mist. The bloodline of the coiling dragon lineage contained poison, and they were good at using it. However, he did not realize what sort of existence he was facing. Given the bloodline of the true body of the dragon race, the poison was not a threat to Suzimo at all. Suzimo traversed through the pitch-black mist. His palm did not pause at all as he suppressed the young man of the coiling dragon lineage and sent the latter flying. Poof! The young man of the coiling dragon race spat out a mouthful of black blood and fainted on the spot. Suzimo charged into the group of dragons, and wherever he passed, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. All the dragons were sent flying, and none of them could stop him. More than 100 dragons were crippled by Suzimo in the blink of an eye. If it was in the cultivation world outside, the remaining cultivators would have long dispersed after encountering such a situation. However, among the dragon race, even the 4 factions did not retreat despite their thin bloodlines. The outcome of not retreating was being suppressed by blood. With one hand behind his back, Suzimo merely used a single move. He suppressed everyone with his palm. However, none of the 100-odd dragons could defend against that single move. Complete suppression. None of the dragons that crowded at Solitary Cloud's lair were innocent. All of them had bullied Solitary Cloud before. In the blink of an eye, more than 100 dragons were suppressed by Suzimo. They either fainted completely, or were left lying on the ground letting out tragic cries from time to time. He crushed everything in his path. On the battlefield, blood chi surged. Apart from Suzimo, the only one who could stand on the spot was a young man from the Flood Dragon lineage. Arriving before the person, Suzimo looked at him expressionlessly with a calm gaze without saying anything. The two of them were extremely close. The young man from the Flood Dragon lineage was pale, and his arms trembled slightly. He was drenched in sweat. Although he had the dignity of a dragon, it was impossible for him to be completely fearless in the face of such a situation. The two of them stood face to face, but the young man from the Flood Dragon lineage did not dare to raise his head to look ahead. Against Suzimo's terrifying aura, that person lowered his head and could not move at all. He even had the urge to kneel on the ground. The person before him had evoked the fear in the depths of his soul and blood. At that moment, the commotion here had already alarmed many dragons of the mixed dragon lineage. In fact, there were even figures from the 5 dragon lineages not far away. Thump! Right in front of everyone, the young man from the Flood Dragon lineage suddenly knelt down. His body was trembling uncontrollably as though he was enduring immense fear and pressure. This scene caused an uproar among the dragons. It was one thing for him to suppress the dragons, but it was another thing for a flood dragon to be forced to kneel by someone with one hand behind his back. Pooey! A dragon spat out his saliva forcefully with a disdainful expression and sneered, "How embarrassing! Even if you can't win, you can't kneel. The dignity of the dragon race is not to be sullied. In my opinion, that flood dragon won't be able to survive in the future and will definitely be bullied to death by the other flood dragons." The young man from the Flood Dragon lineage felt bitter when he heard the voices of the dragons. If one did not stand opposite the scarlet-haired man, they would never be able to feel that terrifying pressure. He could not defend against it at all. The scarlet-haired man gave him a feeling that he was even more terrifying than the dragons of the 5 lineages. "Do you know why I didn't suppress you?" Suzimo asked indifferently. And no. The young man from the Flood Dragon lineage's heart skipped a beat, and his voice paused for a moment. Suzimo said, "Go back and have your young master of the Flood Dragon lineage come see me." Although his tone was calm, it was filled with unquestionable dominance. Yes. For some reason, the young man from the Flood Dragon lineage could only agree subconsciously. That person stood up as though he had been pardoned and did not even dare to turn around. He merely lowered his head and retreated slowly. After a few feet, he turned and left hurriedly. Chapter 1074, Bloodline Suppression. Chapter 1074, Bloodline Suppression. Not far away, a few illumination dragons stood with fiery red hair and wild expressions, watching everything calmly. Interesting. The leader of the group, a young man from the illumination dragon lineage, smirked and murmured. An illumination dragon behind him frowned slightly and said in a deep voice, "Brother Chio, this long MO seems to be a little tricky to deal with." A look of disdain flashed through the eyes of the young man called Long Chio as he remarked indifferently, "Bullying some mixed dragons is nothing." "That's right." Another illumination dragon sneered, "Given the commotion here, the young masters of the 4 mixed dragon factions will definitely appear. If Long Mo can't even get past the 4 mixed dragon young masters, he's not worth Brother Chio's attention." On the other side, dragons from the horned and hornless dragon lineages had just arrived from the primordial divine spring. This Long Mo does have some capabilities. If that's all there is, it's nothing much. Although Suzimo had suppressed more than 100 dragons along the way, his combat strength was nothing in the eyes of the 5 lineages. All dragons of the 5 lineages had such strength. However, these dragons did not know that the combat strength Suzimo displayed earlier on was less than 30% of his true strength. The mixed dragons in the surroundings no longer advanced. If Suzimo could suppress more than 100 dragons single-handedly, they would only be bullied if they went forward. On the battlefield, the dragons that were strewn all over the ground did not step forward either. More and more dragons gathered here. All the dragons knew that this matter would only end when the young master of the Flood Dragon lineage arrived. Suzimo returned to Solitary Cloud's side and whispered, "Sorry that I was late." "Master, what are you saying?" Solitary Cloud laughed. "You don't know how excited I was when I walked out of the primordial divine spring and found out that I was in the Dragon Bone Valley. I won't regret it no matter how much I suffer here." "Yes?" Suzimo nodded. "In the dragon race, strength is everything. There's a limit to what I can help you with. If you want to survive here, you'll have to rely on yourself." The reason why Suzimo attacked was not because Solitary Cloud lost in fights with dragons of the Flood Dragon lineage. It was normal for one to lose against a group of dragons because their skills were inferior. Suzimo was furious that the dragons here did not give Solitary Cloud a chance to cultivate and become stronger. They did not even give him time to recover from his injuries. That was not fair. Since this place was unfair, he would create a fair environment for Solitary Cloud. "Don't worry, Master." Solitary Cloud's gaze was resolute. "As long as I'm given time to cultivate, I'll definitely be able to transform into a dragon." Pausing for a moment, Solitary Cloud's gaze landed on dragons of the 5 lineages not far away. With a grim expression, he whispered, "Master, the people from the 5 lineages are here. Things seem to have gotten a little out of hand." "It's fine." Suzimo glanced sideways indifferently before retracting his gaze. As long as those dragons did not cause trouble for him, he could not be bothered. Time slowly passed. There were not only dragons from the mixed dragon lineage, many from the 5 lineages came as well. Countless gazes landed on Suzimo with strong hostility. Anyone with a fragile heart would not be able to withstand being surrounded by dragons. Even though Solitary Cloud was sitting behind Suzimo, he was still feeling uneasy. As a WYRM, he would feel immense pressure even if he was targeted by a single dragon, let alone a group of dragons. However, Suzimo was composed and merely closed his eyes to regulate his breathing. Right then, a commotion broke out among the dragons. The group of dragons dispersed as another group of dragons in brocade robes strode in. The 4 people in the lead had sharp gazes and exuded a terrifying aura. The 4 young masters are here. This is going to be interesting. The young master of the Flood Dragon lineage is considered to be at the perfected Void Reversion realm with half a foot into the Dharma characteristic realm. Longmo's bloodline is impure, and I don't think he can last more than 10 moves. The dragons were invigorated and discussed fervently. Suzimo opened his eyes and stood up slowly. "Which of you is the young master of the Flood Dragon lineage?" he asked indifferently with a cold expression as his gaze lingered on the 4 dragon young masters. A blue-robed young man in the middle stood out and grinned slightly, revealing a row of pearly white teeth. He gave off a ferocious aura and sneered, "I am." The other 3 young masters crossed their arms and watched coldly from the sidelines. "Oh." Suzimo raised his brow and asked, "I heard that you want to make Solitary Cloud your mount." "That's right. It's the honor of that WYRM to be able to be my mount." The young master of the Flood Dragon lineage sneered. "Why? Do you have a problem with that?" "Yes." Suzimo nodded and said slowly, "He's my mount. If you want to subdue him, you'll have to ask for my opinion first." "Sure." The young master of the Flood Dragon lineage gripped his fists and twisted his neck. Sounds of bones cracking could be heard coming from his body as his eyes shone with a ferocious glint. "If you have any objections, I'll beat you until you have none." Boom. The bloodline of the young master of the Flood Dragon lineage surged and his feet stomped heavily on the ground. He burst forth with immense strength and charged towards Suzimo. There was no need for nonsense between dragons. All of them were decisive in killing. Boom. Suzimo's expression was calm. He merely took a single step forward, and an even louder bang sounded. Plow Heaven Stride. The ground shook. The surrounding dragons were caught off guard and swayed. With the Plow Heaven Stride, a torrential might burst forth from Suzimo's body and suppressed the incoming young master of the Flood Dragon lineage. The Flood Dragon young master's expression changed. The moment he arrived in front of Suzimo, he felt a terrifying might surge towards him and his heart shuddered. That man seems to have some tricks up his sleeves. The thought flashed through the Flood Dragon young master's mind and his vision darkened. Swoosh! An evil gust of wind blew past. Suzimo extended his palm and spread his fingers, covering the skies and creating a large shadow that shrouded his head as it suppressed down. The aura was tragic. The Flood Dragon young master shuddered. He finally realized how the 100-odd dragons from before were defeated. The pressure was way too great. This was an absolute suppression of bloodline and strength. The Flood Dragon young master roared into the skies and let out a loud dragon roar. Circulating his bloodline to its limits, he punched out with both fists towards Suzimo's palm. Boom! The fists and palm collided with a loud bang. Suzimo was motionless with a calm expression. After a brief moment, blood drained from the face of the Flood Dragon young master. Crack, crack, crack. The sound of bones cracking could be heard from his arms. Poof, poof, poof. The clothes on his arms were torn apart and the flesh on his arms exploded into blood mists under the suppression of the terrifying power. Bang! The Flood Dragon young master smashed onto the ground heavily, creating a huge pit. The dragons were shocked. Even the dragons of the 5 lineages frowned. One move. The Flood Dragon young master, who was half a step into Dharma characteristic realm, could not even defend against a single palm strike from Longmo. There was no need for technique. This was an absolute bloodline suppression. Chapter 1075, Domineering Sweep. Chapter 1075, Domineering Sweep. To be fair, The bloodline that Zemo cultivated from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness was stronger than even the purest illumination dragon bloodline. The young master of the flood dragon lineage before him could not even match up to the bloodline of the illumination dragon lineage. How could he fight against Zemo? Zemo was able to suppress the young master of the flood dragon lineage with ease merely by relying on his physique. The young master of the flood dragon lineage's arms were broken and his flesh was mangled. He struggled to stand up and glared at Zemo fiercely. Although he lost, he would not admit defeat. The reason why he was able to become the young master of the flood dragon lineage was because he had fought his way up and had encountered even more tragic situations. This injury was nothing to him. Now that he was defeated, he would naturally cultivate even harder and work hard to become a member of the 5 dragon lineages. As long as the dragons of the mixed dragon lineage were strong enough, they had a chance to pass the test of the 5 dragon lineages to become one of them. Of course, this test was extremely dangerous. In the past 10,000 years, there were less than 10 mixed dragons that could pass this test, and their lives were easily at risk. Good. The young master of the flood dragon lineage grit his teeth. Longamo, you do have some tricks up your sleeves. I'll remember today's humiliation in my heart. I'll definitely challenge you in the future. Today's matter is not over yet. Zemo pointed in front of Solitary Cloud and said indifferently, "Come over and apologize." Ha 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 ha. Even though the young master of the flood dragon lineage was severely injured, he reared his head in laughter as though he had heard the greatest joke in the world. Apologize? The young master of the flood dragon lineage asked coldly with a mocking gaze, "Long Emo, while I may have lost, it's impossible if you want me to bow my head. It's not up to you in front of me." When Zemo saw that the young master of the flood dragon lineage was still extremely arrogant, he could not help but snort coldly. Stepping forward, he reached out and grabbed the latter's neck, lifting him up. The young master of the flood dragon lineage had a strong physique, but Zemo carried him as though he was carrying a chick and turned to stand in front of Solitary Cloud. "Kneel down and apologize." Zemo's tone was calm but unquestionable. "Dream on." The young master of the flood dragon lineage spat out with a ferocious gaze without any fear. Bang! Bang! Zemo extended his toes and tapped gently on the young master's knees. The bones in both knees cracked instantly. Ah! The young master of the flood dragon lineage could not hold it in any longer and let out a tragic cry. His knees buckled and he knelt down. There was no pity in Zemo's eyes. Compared to Solitary Cloud's injuries, this was nothing. Thankfully, Solitary Cloud's life was not in danger. If anything happened to Solitary Cloud, Zemo would dare to kill even in the Dragonbone Valley. Zemo's expression was cold as he pushed down the head of the young master of the flood dragon lineage in front of everyone. The young master of the flood dragon lineage was flushed red. No matter how he channeled his bloodline, he could not withstand the pressure above him. He could only watch helplessly as his face approached the ground. Humiliation. It was an unprecedented humiliation. The young master of the flood dragon lineage was indignant. Zemo did not only want the young master of the flood dragon lineage to apologize, he intended for the dragons of the mixed dragon lineage to watch as well. If they fought fairly with Solitary Cloud, he would not care. However, if they tried to bully him in numbers, they would end up in the same state as the young master of the flood dragon lineage. Longamo, aren't you going a little overboard? Right then, the young master of the cloud dragon lineage stood out and glared at Zemo. His eyes were filled with fighting spirit without any fear. The young master of the flood dragon lineage felt the power above his head lighten and could not help but feel ecstatic. Finally, someone stood out. Releasing his palm, Zemo turned around and nodded. "Since you've taken the initiative to stand out, it saves me the trouble of looking for you." Before he finished his sentence, Zemo's figure flashed and a series of afterimages appeared behind him. In the blink of an eye, he arrived before the young master of the cloud dragon lineage. "Kneel down too." Zemo hollered and reached out with his gigantic palm, grabbing towards the young master of the Cloud Dragon lineage. The Cloud Dragon young master's expression changed. When Suzimo charged over, he realized that the difference in strength between the two of them was too great. They could not fight head-on. Swoosh! The Cloud Dragon young master spat out a gigantic cloud of mist and disappeared. Compared to the Cloud Dragon earlier on, the secret skill released by the Cloud Dragon young master was clearly much more brilliant. Surrounded by clouds, Suzimo's spirit consciousness, vision, and hearing were severely affected. The presence of the Cloud Dragon young master was erratic, and he could avoid Suzimo's senses. He was definitely not a nobody to become a young master of a lineage. Suzimo had a calm expression. He had many methods that could dispel that secret skill. However, at that moment, he was motionless and even his eyes were closed. All of a sudden, Suzimo opened his eyes and released 2 divine lights. Suddenly, he shifted horizontally and leaned in that direction. Bang! There was a dull sound of defeat. A figure fell out of the clouds with blood spewing from his mouth. Half of his body was smashed and he looked miserable. It was the Cloud Dragon young master. 2 moves. Even the Cloud Dragon young master who released his secret skill could only withstand 2 moves. Among Suzimo's many techniques, the simplest and easiest was to rely on his spirit perception. The only way for the Cloud Dragon young master to avoid it was if he could hold himself back and not attack Suzimo. Otherwise, as long as he made a move, Suzimo would be the first to sense it. No matter how strong the secret skill was, his true body would be detected. The clouds dispersed and Suzimo's figure appeared. He picked up the Cloud Dragon young master and threw him beside the Flood Dragon young master. The Flood Dragon young master was just feeling ecstatic when he discovered that the Cloud Dragon young master was tossed to his side as well. Bang! Bang! Suzimo did the same and tapped the Cloud Dragon young master on his knees, making him kneel in front of Solitary Cloud. The 2 young masters had ugly expressions and their eyes were spewing fire. Under the watchful eyes of so many dragons, this was a humiliation for them. The expressions of the Coiling Dragon and Rain Dragon young masters were terrible as well. They had already vaguely realized something. However, given their status, there was no way they could retreat under such circumstances. They had not expected to provoke such a terrifying existence. Suzimo turned around and walked towards the 2 young masters, saying calmly, "The 2 of you, kneel here as well." The expressions of the 2 young masters changed slightly. True enough, this Longimo actually wanted the 4 young masters to kneel and apologize to Solitary Cloud. "Longimo, don't go overboard," the young master of the Coiling Dragon lineage said sternly. "I should be the one saying that to you guys." Suzimo strode forward and did not waste his breath on the young master of the Coiling Dragon lineage. He attacked right away and suppressed the latter. "You!" Before the young master of the Coiling Dragon lineage could react, he was severely injured by Suzimo's punch and fell. The difference was too great. The young master of the Rain Dragon lineage was not spared either. He was severely injured after 2 breaths. In the blink of an eye, all 4 young masters were suppressed by Suzimo. Suzimo swept through the mixed dragon lineage domineeringly. Chapter 1076, 50% Strength. Chapter 1076, 50% Strength. Most of the dragons looked at Suzimo with reverence in their eyes. In the dragon race, strength reigned supreme. In order to obtain the acknowledgement of the dragons, one had to rely on their strength. From this day forth, at least within the region of the mixed dragon lineage, most of the dragons would no longer dare to provoke him. Suzimo carried the Cloud and Coiling Dragon young masters and arrived before Solitary Cloud. He kicked and smashed the knees of the 2 young masters, causing them to kneel down. Although the 4 young masters were defeated, they refused to bow down. In their eyes, Longimo wouldn't be smug for long. They were sharp and had long noticed that dragons of the 5 lineages were here. Not far away, there were even people from the Illumination Dragon lineage watching the battle. They had long heard the news that many Illumination Dragons were waiting for Longimo to leave the primordial divine spring to teach him a lesson. The four young masters believed that with their defeat, the Illumination Dragons who were watching the battle would definitely not stand by idly. At that time, it would be the end for Long Emo. The bloodline power of the Illumination Dragon lineage was much stronger than theirs, and was definitely not something that Long Emo could compare with given his impure bloodline. Right then, a few Illumination Dragons who were watching from afar walked over. The four young masters were invigorated and felt as though their injuries had lessened. Piak, piak, piak. Not far away, the sound of clapping could be heard. Long Chio of the Illumination Dragon lineage strode over with a relaxed expression. The corners of his lips curled up slightly as he remarked in a mocking manner, "Long Emo, you sure are impressive. You've already swept through the mixed dragon lineage after a month in the Dragon Bone Valley. Ha ha ha. His bloodline isn't pure, so I reckon he can only vent his anger on a few dragons." The few Illumination Dragons behind Long Chio roared with laughter. The dragon race had always been extremely hostile towards outsiders. Furthermore, this outsider's bloodline was impure, and he even enjoyed the primordial divine spring that many dragons were not qualified to enjoy. The reason why Suzimo was so domineering was because there were no rules or etiquette in the dragon race. If he wanted to gain a foothold, he had to show absolute strength. Is there anything? Suzimo was expressionless. When he saw that they were from the Illumination Dragon lineage, he was unwilling to bother them on account of his relationship with the red-headed ghost. Furthermore, the Illumination Dragon lineage did not do anything overboard to Solitary Cloud. It's not bad that you want to avenge your mount. Long Chio raised his chin and said coldly, but don't forget, this is the dragon race. Your mount is a WYRM. No matter how strong you are, you can't change his fate. Fate? Suzimo sneered. He had never believed in fate. If he believed in fate, he wouldn't have been able to get to where he was today. He did not want to bother with the few Illumination Dragons, nor did he want to get into a conflict with them. Surveying his surroundings, Suzimo looked at the dragons and said in a deep voice, "I'm not doing this for anything else. I just want to fight for a fair opportunity for Solitary Cloud." No matter what bloodline or lineage he is from, he has already obtained the recognition of the dragon race by coming here and obtaining a lair. I don't care if you guys fight against Solitary Cloud. After a brief pause, Suzimo continued, however, if he's cultivating in the lair, you guys can't disturb him. That's the bottom line. Anyone who dares to cross that bottom line will end up like this. With that, Suzimo slapped the heads of the four young masters and smashed them onto the ground. Bang! They knelt and kowtowed. When they saw that, the expressions of Long Chio and the others darkened. Suzimo's disregard enraged them. Long Emo, are you still in the mood to care about others? Long Chio's gaze was cold as he said slowly, "You're just a bastard with an impure bloodline. If you want to establish yourself in the Illumination Dragon lineage, you'll have to get through me first." Suzimo furrowed his brows slightly. He gave in repeatedly, but the other party took advantage of it time and again. He did not want to have any conflict with anyone from the Illumination Dragon lineage because of the red-headed ghost and his bloodline. However, if Long Chio continued to be oblivious, it wouldn't be Suzimo's fault. Bastard? Suzimo nodded. Don't blame me if you dare to speak to me like that. Boom. Suzimo stomped his feet and the ground quaked. Long Chio channeled his bloodline and his aura surged. He stood on the ground firm and motionless as he sneered, "Puny tricks." Before he could finish his sentence, Suzimo had already attacked. Swoosh! A gigantic palm descended and caused the air to explode. Shadows covered the skies and a suffocating aura surged forth. Long Chio was watching from the side and was already prepared for Suzimo's move. He raised his arms and his blood surged. The flesh on his arms expanded and his clothes tore. His two tough arms were muscular and exuded a scorching aura like two gigantic red iron rods. Herg. Exhaling, Long Chio raised his arms and blocked Suzimo's palm. Bang! Both sides collided head-on. Heat waves surged and spread rapidly in all directions. Su Zimo was motionless with his scarlet hair fluttering. However, Long Qiu's expression changed slightly and he staggered 3 steps back. He was actually the one disadvantaged in this first round of exchange between them. This time round, the dragons truly realized how terrifying Long Imo was. It was nothing much to be able to suppress the mixed dragon lineage. However, if he could fight against the dragons of the 5 lineages, it proved that he was indeed backed by immense strength. Long Qiu took 3 steps back and burst into laughter. Long Imo, that's all you've got? Long Qiu smiled. Although I took 3 steps back, do you know that I only used 80% of my strength to defend against your palm strike? If I release my full strength, you'll definitely be defeated. Oh. Su Zimo raised his brow. He did not care how much strength Long Qiu used. He only knew that he had only used 30% of his strength in that palm strike. Since that's the case, take another palm strike from me. Su Zimo strode forward and reached out with his palm once more to suppress the other party. Swoosh! An evil wind blew. Roar! Long Qiu reared his head and howled into the skies, letting out a resounding dragon roar that reverberated through the world. Immediately after, Long Qiu's body expanded and tore his clothes. His bloodline was pushed to its limits and scarlet dragon scales appeared on his body. Typically speaking, apart from the battles in the Dragon Blood battlefield, dragons were not allowed to revert to their full dragon forms in the other regions. But now, Long Qiu was not breaking the rules of the dragon race. His current state was similar to Su Zimo's dragonification in the past. It was only a half-dragon form. Among the dragon race, there were 2 phases of dragonification. The first was the half-dragon and the second was the full dragon form. Long Qiu sounded disdainful in his tone. However, he did not dare to be careless against Su Zimo. With just a single exchange, he had already transformed into his half-dragon form and was prepared to release all his strength to defend against Su Zimo's palm strike. A roar burst forth from the depths of Long Qiu's throat. He strode forward and raised his arms to defend against the incoming palm strike. Bang! There was a deafening sound. Both of them maintained that posture motionlessly, as though they were frozen. After a brief pause, a series of crackling sounds could be heard from within Long Qiu's body. It was as though all the bones in his body had collapsed. Long Qiu spat out a mouthful of blood. Under the immense pressure, blood seeped out from the gaps of his dragon scales. Su Zimo merely used 50% of his strength, but Long Qiu could not defend against it. Chapter 1077, Noisy. Chapter 1077, Noisy. Even if Su Zimo defeated more than 100 mixed dragons and suppressed the 4 young masters of the mixed dragon lineage, the dragons would only be slightly surprised but not shocked. The bloodline of the mixed dragon lineage was thin, and there was a huge difference in their combat strength compared to the 5 dragon lineages. But now, Long Qiu of the Illumination dragon lineage was suppressed so easily by Long Imo before them. That was what truly moved the dragons. The bloodline of the dragon race was terrifying and their physiques were strong. Most of them fought in melee combat. As for Su Zimo, he cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, and his melee combat strength was the most terrifying. Coupled with his dragon true body, he was invincible. Many cultivators in the cultivation world knew this. However, there were only a few people in the Dragon Bone Valley who knew of Su Zimo's background. These dragons had to be insane if they thought they could gain an advantage in melee combat. Up till now, Su Zimo had not even used his bloodline or any melee combat techniques. He merely relied on his physique to suppress and crush everything. You are courting death. Long Qiu struggled to stand up from the ground and glared at Su Zimo fiercely with a livid expression. He lost to an outsider right in front of everyone, and that caused him to feel utterly humiliated. Brother Qiu, are you all right? The few illumination dragons behind him could not help but ask with worried expressions. Scram. Long Qiu pushed everyone away and said coldly, I haven't lost yet. As long as Long Qiu did not admit defeat, he could continue fighting. However, The dragons could tell that Long Chio's organs were already shaken. Even if he continued fighting, he would only be asking for trouble. Su Zimo's expression was indifferent. To be fair, Long Chio's combat strength was definitely not weak. In the cultivation world, he could even be compared to the various titular disciples. However, it was nothing in Su Zimo's eyes. With the help of the primordial divine spring, his body recovered and he had entered the void reversion realm and obtained the pure young spirit, causing his combat strength to increase tremendously. It was no exaggeration to say that he was invincible in melee combat. Long Chio panted heavily, and a huge stream of air spewed from his nose and mouth. It carried a scorching aura, and the rage in his heart burned even more furiously. Even the few illumination dragons not far away could sense it. "Brother Chio?" One of the illumination dragons felt his heart sink as he vaguely realized something. He could not help but exclaim softly, wanting to remind Long Chio to calm down. However, Long Chio did not seem to have heard anything. The illumination dragon lineage possessed the fire attribute, and most of them were extremely hot-tempered and impatient. It was the same for Long Chio. Initially, he already felt immensely humiliated after his defeat. However, Su Zimo's nonchalant attitude triggered him even more. Disdain. Long Chio experienced underestimation like never before. He was a dragon. He would never allow an outsider with an impure bloodline to ride on his head. He would rather endure the punishment of the clan rules and retrieve his dignity by trampling on this outsider. The moment that thought appeared in his mind, it grew wildly and was unstoppable. Roar. Finally, Long Chio could no longer hold it in and howled into the skies, letting out a loud dragon roar. Dragon scales grew on his face and his head changed, forming a pair of gigantic scarlet dragon horns that were towering. Crackle. A series of crackling sounds came from his body. His body expanded and elongated continuously. In the blink of an eye, Long Chio had already vanished and transformed into a scarlet dragon that was dozens of feet long. Dragon scales grew densely on the gigantic dragon's body. Each was the size of a palm, and they looked like pieces of red-hot iron that emitted a scorching aura. Long Chio shook his head and glared at Su Zimo, who was as tiny as an ant on the ground with his lantern-sized dragon eyes, exuding the tremendous might of the dragon race. This was the complete form of a dragon. Normally speaking, apart from the dragon blood battlefield, dragons were not allowed to release their complete forms in other regions of the Dragonbone Valley. That was because when the complete dragon form was released, its strength would increase exponentially and its destructive power would be too terrifying. If it could not contain its power, there would be dragons that would die. As an equivalence to the mortal world, even if children were injured in a bare-handed fight, nothing serious would happen. However, if they wielded sharp sabers, the outcome would be unpredictable. Dragons were rare and difficult to breed. There was no way they would allow a complete dragon form to be released in private fights. That was a rule of the clan. Anyone that disobeyed it would be punished severely. But now that Long Chio was defeated, the blow he received was too great, and he had lost his rationality. Right now, there was only a single thought in his mind: to trample this puny outsider beneath his feet. The dragons were shocked and retreated one after another. Once a dragon started fighting in its complete form and its dozens of feet-long body were to move, there was a high chance that others would be drawn into the fight. It was still all right for dragons of the 5 lineages. However, for those of the mixed dragon lineage, if they were struck by a dozens of feet-long illumination dragon, they would be severely injured even if they did not die. The dragon might was as vast as an ocean and surged over. Even the dragons standing far away felt their hearts skip a beat. Many dragons from the mixed dragon lineage could not defend against this dragon might. However, on the battlefield, Su Zimo's expression was indifferent as usual as he stood there quietly. His eyes were as deep as the sea and his gaze was calm without any emotions. The man and dragon faced off. Gradually, the dragons had an illusion. Rather than Long Chio looking down on Su Zimo, the opposite seemed to be true instead. Compared to Long Chio's dragon body, Su Zimo looked incomparably tiny like gravel. However, for some reason, that was the illusion the dragons felt when they witnessed the scene. It was an invisible aura. Even in his complete dragon form, Long Qiu could not match Su Zimo's aura. A horned dragon shook his head slightly. Long Qiu lost. Nobody on the battlefield knew what Long Qiu was feeling right now. Under Su Zimo's gaze, he felt helpless. All he wanted to do was to bow down and take on his human form once more, lowering that haughty head of his. He felt an unimaginable pressure. It was as though doing something like that in front of Long Imo was considered as an act of rebellion against his superiors. Long Qiu hated that feeling. Deep in his heart, he was already starting to panic. He knew that if he did not attack now, he would have to bow down and admit defeat in front of Su Zimo merely because of the latter's gaze. Roar! Long Qiu mustered his courage and let out a deafening roar at Su Zimo. How noisy! Before the roar faded, Su Zimo hollered softly and arrived beneath Long Qiu in a flash. He reached out with his gigantic palm and grabbed Long Qiu's dragon tail. Swinging his arm, he smashed it against the ground. Boom! A deafening bang that shook the heavens and earth sounded. The hearts of the dragons skipped a beat. After the loud bang, there was silence. Dust and gravel flew everywhere on the ground. A moment later, the dust dispersed, and in a ravine that was more than 100 feet long lay a badly injured illumination dragon. His eyes were tightly shut, and he was completely unconscious. Chapter 1078, Storm. Chapter 1078, Storm. For an extremely long time, the vicinity of the battlefield was silent. The dragons looked at the figure not far away as complicated emotions surged in their hearts. This outsider had only stayed in the Dragonbone Valley for a month, and had yet to cultivate the various cultivation techniques of the dragon race. Furthermore, this outsider's bloodline was impure. However, it was precisely such an outsider who trampled on the dignity of the dragons in the Dragonbone Valley. It was hard to imagine how Long Imo would have grown if he had cultivated in the Dragonbone Valley for more hundreds, or even 1,000 years. A horned dragon glanced sideways and whispered to his clansman beside him, "Go back and tell the eldest mistress that Long Imo has already come out of seclusion. Furthermore, he's not weak and is a little tricky. Tell her to be careful." Got it. The clansman turned and left, heading towards the habitat of the horned dragon lineage. The remaining few illumination dragons exchanged glances and nodded tacitly before leaving in a hurry. On the battlefield, Su Zimo could not be bothered with Long Qiu, who was lying on the ground. He did not even know Long Qiu's name. Since this illumination dragon had released his complete dragon form, there would naturally be enforcers of the dragon race that would look for him and punish him severely. Su Zimo turned around and returned to Solitary Cloud's side. His gaze shifted as he looked at the 4 young masters of the mixed dragon lineage kneeling before him. The 4 young masters were still dumbfounded and could not recover from the shocking scene earlier on. Sensing Su Zimo's gaze, the 4 of them jolted awake and broke out in cold sweat. The reason why the 4 of them refused to submit earlier was partly because they were embarrassed. On the other hand, and most importantly, the 4 of them believed that there was definitely someone in the Illumination Dragon lineage who could suppress Long Imo. At that time, Long Imo might end up in a worse state than them, and it was uncertain who would be the laughingstock. However, they had not expected Long Qiu of the Illumination Dragon lineage to be suppressed by Long Imo as well. The Flood Dragon young master felt vexed when he recalled how they took the initiative to challenge this person earlier on. Apologize. Su Zimo did not say much and merely uttered a single word. However, the 4 of them felt immense pressure. They could vaguely sense that they would not be able to endure the consequences if this continued on. Sorry. The Flood Dragon young master lowered his head and whispered. Although his voice was soft, the dragons present had powerful hearing and could naturally hear it clearly. The other 3 young masters did not persist either and apologized one after another. Solitary Cloud clenched his fists with an emotional expression as he leaned against the cold wall with a burning heart. He was already overjoyed that Su Zimo could bring him to the Dragonbone Valley. He had no regrets even if he died here. What he did not expect was that he would receive the respect of the dragons here. However, this respect did not come from the hearts of the dragons. "You guys can leave." Suzimo waved his hand. The four young masters had their knees shattered, but they struggled to stand up still. Enduring the pain, they turned and staggered away. "Everyone." Suzimo surveyed his surroundings and said in a deep voice, "Although Solitary Cloud is my mount, I won't stand up for him for no reason. If he was defeated and injured because he fought with anyone outside the lair, it would be because he isn't skilled enough. He can't blame anyone for his lack of strength, and I won't interfere either." At that point, a commotion broke out among the dragons. Many dragons looked at Solitary Cloud with hostile gazes. This meant that as long as it was a fair fight, they could still teach Solitary Cloud a lesson. Suzimo turned around and looked at Solitary Cloud without saying anything, his eyes filled with encouragement and trust. Although Suzimo had saved Solitary Cloud by fighting here, Solitary Cloud would still have to rely on himself if he wanted to survive in the Dragonbone Valley. The opportunity was right before him. Suzimo fought to create a fair environment for him. Whether or not Solitary Cloud could transform into a dragon or join the 5 lineages was up to himself. Whether or not Solitary Cloud could keep up with Suzimo's footsteps depended on his destiny. Solitary Cloud understood the meaning in Suzimo's eyes and nodded heavily. At that moment, his heart surged with boundless pride. Initially, his cultivation goal was to transform into a dragon and become a member of the dragon race. It was only now that he realized that if he could keep up with Suzimo, his future would be the skies and stars. Even Tianhuang mainland could not limit him. The dragons gradually dispersed. Suzimo sent Solitary Cloud back to the dragon lair and left as well. Solitary Cloud needed to cultivate, and so did he. In the mystic classic of the 12 Demon Kings of the Great Wilderness, the Yin and Yang spirit sections were related to the Dragon King Desolate Ocean. It was still fine for the Yin spirit section, and Suzimo cultivated with no issues. However, the Yang spirit section was filled with a large number of ancient words, and he could not understand the meaning behind them. That was the reason why he could only barely comprehend the superficial knowledge of the dermic art, Baron, in the Yang spirit section. It was neither strong nor weak. The power of Baron did not seem to have a realm restriction. Back when he was at the nascent soul realm, he could use Baron to affect Dharma characteristic Tao Lords. This was the terrifying aspect of Baron. However, the power of Baron was not exactly strong either. Even at the center of Baron, lifespan was diminished at 100 years a breath. The effects at the boundaries were even almost negligible. Void reversions had a lifespan of 5,000 years. Dharma characteristic Tao Lords had a lifespan of 10,000 years. Indeed, Baron was naturally a great threat to cultivators in their twilight years. Back then, the Dharma characteristic Tao Lord of Hellfire Hall died silently after being enveloped by Baron. However, 4 void reversions Tao beings or Dharma characteristic Tao Lords at their peaks, 100 years of lifespan was not considered much. As long as they were strong enough, they could definitely escape. Therefore, Suzimo intended to make use of his opportunity to cultivate in the dragon race to see if he could comprehend the secrets of Baron and unleash its true power. This was the only dermic art of the Yin and Yang spirit sections. The power of that dermic art was definitely not that weak. Apart from Baron, there was another essence spirit secret skill in the Yang spirit section. Suzimo managed to comprehend a little of Baron. However, for the essence spirit secret skill, the ancient words were even more complicated, and he could not understand them at all. According to the description in the Yang spirit section, the might of this essence spirit secret skill was even more terrifying. This essence spirit secret skill was also the essence of the entire Yang spirit section. The essence spirit secret skill was known as the reverse scale. Anyone who touched the reverse scale of a dragon would die. If he could comprehend the secret of the reverse scale in the dragon race, his combat strength would rise to another level. Suzimo headed towards the habitat of the Illumination Dragon lineage with anticipation. At that moment, he did not know that the entire Illumination Dragon lineage habitat had already fallen into chaos on his way back. It was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples and caused a huge uproar. To begin with, many Illumination dragons disliked Suzimo. But now that Suzimo actually swept through the mixed dragon lineage and Long Chio of the Illumination dragon lineage, many Illumination dragons were enraged. Suzimo had yet to realize that another storm was awaiting him within the Illumination dragon lineage. Chapter 1079, Hidden Dragon Ranking. Chapter 1079, Hidden Dragon Ranking. Long Chio was defeated by that newcomer. This Long Imo has some tricks up his sleeves. It's said that Long Chio went against the clan rules and transformed into his complete dragon form. However, he was still suppressed by a single move. I don't believe it. How capable can an outsider with an impure bloodline and hasn't cultivated here be? At that moment, every young Illumination dragon in the Illumination dragon habitat was discussing this matter. Most of the Void Reversion Realm Illumination dragons were eager to give it a shot. They had fought against one another countless times and were long sick of it. Now that an outsider had finally arrived, every single Illumination dragon wanted to fight Suzimo. I heard that even Long Yi has been alerted and is out of seclusion. Brother Yi is out of seclusion? An Illumination dragon exclaimed. Before Brother Yi entered seclusion, he was already ranked 5th on the Hidden Dragon ranking. Now that he's out, it looks like he has a chance to advance to the next rank. This Long Imo is pretty decent to be able to attract the attention of a dragon on the Hidden Dragon ranking. Another Illumination dragon suddenly said mysteriously, I heard that not only Brother Yi, there's also a dragon on the Hidden Dragon ranking who's prepared to cause trouble for Long Imo. Who? Many Illumination dragons came over and asked curiously. Hee hee. The Illumination dragon let out a strange laugh and said in a low voice, the only female dragon on the Hidden Dragon ranking. Pissed? Upon hearing that, the surrounding Illumination dragons gasped and their expressions changed. That tyrant dragon? Given the temper of that tyrant dragon, even if Long Imo doesn't die, he's bound to lose a layer of skin. Sure, keep it down. If she hears us calling her the tyrant dragon, she'll definitely come looking for trouble with us. Say, Long Shi is so beautiful, but why is her temper worse than us Illumination dragons? I really wonder which dragon will be able to tame her. I heard that the number 1 of the Hidden Dragon ranking is pursuing her. You mean to say? Many Illumination dragons exchanged glances with odd expressions. Right then, a commotion broke out in the distance and many Illumination dragons headed over with unfriendly expressions. Long Imo is back, someone said. Along the way, Suzimo pondered about his future plans in the dragon race. When he arrived at the Illumination dragon habitat and saw the Illumination dragons who were eager to fight, he realized that the battle earlier on was far from enough for him to secure a foothold in the Dragonbone Valley. Rather, in the dragon race, one required thunderous methods that could subdue the group of dragons. Otherwise, there would be no decrease in such fights. On both sides of the road stood many Illumination dragons. Every single one of them looked at Suzimo with hostility and provocation. Suzimo continued forward calmly. That's the outsider? He doesn't look anything special. Fufu, he has delicate features and a frail body. I can suppress him with a single finger. More and more Illumination dragons gathered here. Before long, Suzimo realized that he had entered the primordial divine spring the moment he arrived. He did not know the layout of the Illumination dragon's habitat, nor did he know where his lair was. Excuse me, where is my lair? Suzimo came before an Illumination dragon and asked with a friendly smile. Although the Illumination dragon was only at the nascent soul realm, he was not afraid of Suzimo at all. He merely sneered and rolled his eyes, ignoring the latter completely. Suzimo was not annoyed. After taking a few steps, he came before another Illumination dragon and asked with a smile, May I know where my lair is? This Illumination dragon was at the Void Reversion realm. This meant that the two of them had a chance of fighting. Do you want to know? The Illumination dragon smirked and pointed at his nose, saying coldly, Get past me first. The two of them were extremely close to one another. Suzimo looked at the young illumination dragon before him quietly and shook his head gently with a soft sigh. "You're too weak." The moment he said that, Suzimo suddenly reached out. His movement was as fast as lightning without any warning. The illumination dragon had not expected Suzimo to be so decisive and attack first despite being surrounded by a group of dragons. While he was in a daze, Suzimo's palm had already landed on the top of his head and rubbed it gently. A tremendous amount of energy surged into his consciousness and the illumination dragon's eyes rolled back. His body went limp and he fainted on the spot, falling in Suzimo's footsteps. Longimo, how dare you?" A roar sounded from the dragons. "You're not convinced?" Suzimo swept his gaze at him. The Void Reversion Illumination Dragon was not afraid at all. He leaped into the air and transformed into a half-dragon with sharp claws and fangs. In a fight between dragons, very few would take on their half-dragon form right away. This also meant that the Illumination Dragon was wary and was prepared to unleash his full strength. Boom! Stomping down, Suzimo rose from the ground and threw a punch at the Illumination Dragon in midair. The Illumination Dragon's gaze was ferocious as he grabbed towards Suzimo's fist with one hand, while his other dragon claw swiped towards Suzimo's head. Suzimo's eyes flashed with mockery, and he did not dodge at all. Bang! Fist and palm collided. Crack, crack, crack. Immediately after, the sound of bones cracking could be heard in midair. The Illumination Dragon revealed a pained expression as he felt an incomparably terrifying power surge into his body. The first things to relent were his wrist and arm. Even with the protection of his dragon scales, the bones inside were already broken. Before his other dragon claw could touch Suzimo's head, his entire body was sent flying by Suzimo's punch. Even in midair, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground, screaming. This time round, the dragons were stunned. Among them, some were strong while others were weak in combat. However, even the strongest expert would find it difficult to release such strength that could defeat an Illumination Dragon in his half-dragon form with a single punch. With that strength, he should have a chance to challenge the Hidden Dragon ranking, right? A weak voice sounded from the crowd. Hidden Dragon ranking? Suzimo furrowed his brows slightly. The name sounded familiar, as though he had seen it somewhere before. After pondering for a moment, a thought flashed through his mind. On the central square of the Dragon Bone Valley, he seemed to have seen two gigantic ranking lists on his way to the mixed dragon habitat after coming out of the primordial divine spring. One of them was the Hidden Dragon ranking. There were 10 names of the dragon race written on it, and they belonged to different lineages. Even without anyone's introduction, he could roughly guess that the dragons on the Hidden Dragon ranking were definitely the strongest and youngest ones from the 5 lineages. In reality, Suzimo's guess was not wrong. The 10 spots on the Hidden Dragon ranking were the 10 strongest dragons at the Void Reversion realm. The other ranking was the Heavenly Dragon ranking, corresponding to the 10 strongest dragon race beings at the Dharma characteristic realm. The 2 ranking lists were extremely valuable. The rankings would change at any moment as well. As long as someone could defeat the dragons above, they would replace them. Unsurprisingly, the young master of the 5 lineages would be the number 1 of the Heavenly Dragon ranking. Suzimo glanced at it once, and his deepest impression was that there were 5 dragons on the Hidden Dragon ranking that came from the Blue Dragon lineage. Furthermore, the number 1 of the Hidden Dragon ranking and Heavenly Dragon ranking were both blue dragons. This also confirmed what Long Yin had told him before. The Blue Dragon was the leader among the 5 lineages. Chapter 1080, Long Yi. Chapter 1080, Long Yi. To be honest, Suzimo did not care about those useless titles at the moment. At the very least, the top of the Golden Core Phenomenon ranking would be rewarded handsomely. However, there was nothing for the Hidden Dragon ranking and Heavenly Dragon ranking. It would only attract the constant challenges of the other dragons. Suzimo only wanted to cultivate peacefully among the dragons. After entering the Dharma characteristic realm, one would be baptized by the ancestral dragon divine pillar and awaken their innate divine powers. Chaos had already appeared on Tianhuang mainland, and many signs indicated that there might be a huge change in the future. He had to raise his strength as soon as possible so that he could survive the upcoming changes. However, the wind would not stop even if the tree wanted peace. Right now, it was impossible for him to stay out of it. Not far away, a man in scarlet brocade robes walked over slowly with an extraordinary aura. The moment he arrived, the surrounding illumination dragons dispersed instinctively to create a path. Although this illumination dragon was also at the Void Reversion realm, he clearly had a high status in the illumination dragon lineage and was extremely authoritative. Brother Yi is here. Let's see what Long Imo can do now. Many illumination dragons looked at Su Zimo with gloating expressions. The brocade-robed man approached and frowned as he looked at the illumination dragon with the severed arm shrieking on the ground, as well as another unconscious dragon. He turned to Su Zimo. Su Zimo looked back with a calm expression. Unlike the other illumination dragons, the brocade-robed man did not show much hostility towards Su Zimo. Instead, he cupped his fists slightly and said in a deep voice, "I'm Long Yi." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He had seen Long Ye's name before on the Hidden Dragon ranking, and he seemed to be ranked 5th. Su Zimo nodded and returned the greeting with cupped fists. "I've heard of you. It's normal for you to be ostracized by your clansmen when you've just arrived in the dragon race." Long Yi said indifferently, "I have some power within the dragon race. How about this? Apologize to these 2 clansmen and we'll forget about what happened today." Many illumination dragons protested when they heard that. "Brother Yi, that lad is way too arrogant." "That's right. He's only been here for a month, and he already went to the mixed dragon region to show off. Upon his return, he injured 2 of our clansmen. We can't let this matter rest just like that. Brother Yi, destroy his arrogance so that he knows his place." Long Yi reached out and pressed down. The voices of the dragons gradually faded. Long Yi said, "Everyone, please give me some face. As long as he's willing to apologize sincerely, don't make things difficult for him today." Some of the illumination dragons no longer spoke, but looked at Su Zimo with hostility, feeling indignant. "Long Imo, help the 2 of them up and apologize. We'll let this matter pass." Long Yi commanded Su Zimo as though it was an order. Suddenly, Su Zimo laughed. Although Long Yi seemed like he was helping him out, in reality, his request was unreasonable. There had never been a case of a victor apologizing to the loser in a fight between dragons. At the end of the day, Long Yi still did not view him as a dragon. Or rather, Long Yi was merely showing off his authority among the dragons while exerting dominance over an outsider like him. "Why should I apologize?" Su Zimo looked at Long Yi with a fake smile and asked instead. Long Yi turned his head slightly, as though he had just met Su Zimo for the first time. With a thud, his eyes burned with flames. "How ungrateful. Brother Yi, he doesn't want any face. Teach him a lesson. There's no need to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Let me do it." Behind Long Yi, an illumination dragon could not hold it in any longer and charged out, prepared to fight Su Zimo. Long Yi extended his arm and stopped the illumination dragon. He glared at Su Zimo and said coldly, "Long Imo, do you know who you're talking to? What's wrong?" Su Zimo smiled gently. "Is there a rule in the dragon race where the strong have to apologize to the weak?" Long Yi smiled as well. However, everyone could sense a suppressed rage in his smile. "You're just an outsider. I gave you this chance because I thought highly of you. Since you don't want it, don't blame me." The flames in Long Ye's eyes burned brighter. "Seems like they were right. You truly don't know your place. Today, I'll teach you a principle. Open your eyes in the dragon race. Not everyone is somebody you can provoke." Before he finished his sentence, Long Yi strode forward and swung his arm, smashing it towards Su Zimo's head. Swoosh! The arm was like a steel whip as the wind howled in its wake. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes slightly. As the 5th on the Hidden Dragon ranking, Long Yi was indeed not weak. The power he released was already rather terrifying. Of course, that power was not enough to threaten him. Su Zimo punched back at Long Ye's fist. Bang! The two fists collided. Su Zimo was motionless, and his expression was normal. However, Long Yi shuddered. He felt a sharp pain surge from his fist into his body. He nearly lost control and cried out in pain. It was only now that he realized that Su Zimo was stronger than he had imagined. Splash! Long Yi channeled his bloodline, and the sound of a tsunami could be heard from his body. The power of his bloodline flowed through his limbs and bones, and the pain from his fist dissipated by more than half instantly. Tsunami blood. Su Zimo had encountered a dragon who had cultivated his bloodline to the tsunami level so quickly. It was definitely not a fluke that Long Yi was able to be on the hidden dragon ranking. Come on. Long Ye's eyes shone brightly as he roared. I'll show you my true strength. He strode forward once more and charged towards Su Zimo. Bang! Boom! Boom! Standing on the spot, Su Zimo channeled his bloodline, and the sound of a tsunami echoed from within his body. It was even more robust and majestic than the sound of Long Ye's bloodline. A commotion broke out among the dragons. Although they possessed the pure bloodline of the dragon race and were extremely strong, most of them had not cultivated to the tsunami blood realm. To think that this outsider with an impure bloodline would have cultivated to the tsunami blood realm. Boom! The two of them collided heavily like two ferocious beasts in human form. Flesh and blood collided while bones rubbed against each other. Blood chi surged and let out a terrifying sound. Right after, under countless gazes, a figure was sent flying. It was Long Yi, the fifth on the hidden dragon ranking. Long Yi crawled up from the ground swiftly. That bit of injury was negligible to him. However, this loss had completely enraged him. Roar! Long Yi roared at Su Zimo and charged forward once more. Bang! 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 The two of them clashed continuously without any technique and fought purely with strength. Long Yi fell and stood up time and again. With the circulation of dragon blood within his body, those external injuries did not affect him much. However, the scene before them left the dragons dumbfounded. Nobody expected Su Zimo to be able to fight against Long Yi. Less than that, nobody expected Long Yi to be the one completely disadvantaged. Chapter 1081, New Ranked 5. Chapter 1081, New Ranked 5. Long Mo's bloodline is impure, but his melee combat strength is indeed strong. However, melee combat is only a part of combat strength. Long Mo is still far from being able to defeat Brother Yi. That's right. As long as Brother Yi uses the secret skill of our Illumination Dragon lineage, victory will be decided immediately. Many Illumination Dragons discussed softly. The secret skill of the Illumination Dragon lineage was the Illumination Dragon Eye. This secret skill was extremely difficult to cultivate and dangerous. Even in the Illumination Dragon lineage, there were very few people who could cultivate it successfully. One's combat strength would at least double if they could cultivate the Illumination Dragon Eye. In melee combat, the sudden release of a visual technique, furthermore one that was this terrifying, was almost destructive. Even if the other party could defend against it, he would definitely exhaust his blood chi and be flustered, unable to defend against the next attack. Long Yi charged forward continuously but was beaten back by Su Zimo repeatedly. The rage in his heart was burning hotter and hotter. Roar! He reared his head and roared into the skies, letting out a loud dragon roar. A series of crackling sounds came from his body as it expanded. He had already transformed into his half-dragon form. The wounds on Long Ye's body were healing at a visible speed. By transforming into a half-dragon, his speed and strength would increase exponentially to an even more terrifying level. Su Zimo was still motionless and had no intention of transforming into a dragon. His scarlet hair danced like flames and his eyes were deep and shone with a bright light. Long Yi charged forward once more and threw a punch. Su Zimo was fearless and did not dodge. He strode forward and returned a punch. Boom! The fists collided with a loud bang. A massive air current burst forth and heat waves surged. Even though Long Yi had transformed into a half-dragon, he did not have the slightest advantage. Long Yi instantly realized that he was definitely not Long Mo's match in melee combat. However, there was no hint of panic in his eyes. Instead, his right eye shone with a blinding light that resembled a blazing sun. Suddenly, a beam of light shot towards Su Zimo's head. Illumination Dragon Eye. A series of cries sounded from the dragons. Many Illumination Dragons were excited. That secret skill was the pride of the Illumination Dragon lineage. The release of the Illumination Dragon Eye meant that the outcome was decided. The reason why Long Yi could reach the 5th position on the Hidden Dragon ranking was not because of his melee combat strength, but because of his Dao visual technique. However, when the dragons saw what happened next, their expressions froze and they lost their voices instantly. Their eyes widened in disbelief. The moment Long Yi released the Illumination Dragon Eye, Su Zimo's right eye released a blazing beam as well. Furthermore, this beam of light had an additional layer of sharpness compared to Long Ye's beam of light, as though it could slice and tear everything. Illumination Dragon Eye? The dragons were dumbfounded. Long Imo was only an outsider and did not have the time or opportunity to cultivate in the dragon race. How could he know the Illumination Dragon Eye? Every single Illumination Dragon knew how difficult it was to cultivate this secret skill. However, this outsider with an impure bloodline had successfully cultivated it. What was even more frightening was that this outsider's Illumination Dragon Eye seemed to be even more powerful than the one released by Long Yi. How was that possible? Boom! The sound produced by the clash of visual techniques was even more terrifying. The two pillars of light shattered. Long Yi shrieked. Blood oozed from his right eye. Although he was not blinded, it still looked extremely terrifying. None of the dragons knew that apart from the secret skill of the dragon race, the Illumination Dragon Eye, Su Zimo's right eye possessed the Illumination Stone. The Illumination Stone transformed into a set of flying swords and released the Illumination Sword formation. Long Ye's Illumination Dragon Eye was no match for the combination of the two powers. Of course, the might of Long Ye's visual technique was already rather terrifying. If this was in the cultivation world, even Dharma-characteristic Dao Lords would have their eye sockets punctured by that attack. Long Imo, how dare you hurt me? Long Yi lunged forward once more with a ferocious expression. His glabella shone and an incomparably powerful spirit consciousness attack burst forth. Essence spirit secret skills were not allowed in the habitat of the dragon race. That was because once Essence spirit secret skills were released, it would be difficult to stop the attacks and dragons could easily die. The situation would become irreversible. However, spirit consciousness attacks were allowed in fights between dragons. That was Long Ye's final trump card. He did not believe that after cultivating for so many years to the perfected void reversion realm, the strength of his spirit consciousness could not compare to an outsider who had just entered the void reversion realm. However, he did not realize what sort of opponent he was facing at all. Although Su Zimo had just entered the void reversion realm, the cultivation technique he cultivated was left behind by Daiyu. Even if he had just entered the void reversion realm and cultivated his yang spirit, this was not someone that Long Yi could challenge. Get lost. When he saw Long Yi pouncing over once more, Su Zimo revealed a hint of impatience as well. He gathered his spirit consciousness and counterattacked. If Long Ye's spirit consciousness was like a raging river, the spirit consciousness that Su Zimo released was like a surging tsunami. Boom! The two spirit consciousnesses collided. Long Ye's expression changed and he grunted. Blood drained from his face and he felt a sharp pain in his mind, almost fainting. In that split second of distraction, Su Zimo had already closed in and punched his chest. Bang! A terrifying power surged into his body. Long Yi could clearly sense that his chest had shattered and his heart had paused for a moment. He felt the world spin around him as he was sent flying far away. Finally, he landed heavily on the ground, his entire body aching. He was defeated. He was dragged down from the hidden dragon ranking by an outsider just like that. Lying in the mud, Long Yi looked at the gray skies with a dim gaze. Up till this point of his cultivation, he had fought against his clansmen countless times and experienced many losses as well. However, The blow this time round was way too great. Brother Yi, are you all right? Many illumination dragons ran over with worried expressions. Their voices sounded extremely distant in his ears. Sigh. Long Yi sighed gently and closed his eyes. He felt conflicted, neither happy nor worried. It was sad to lose. However, he knew that from this day forth, the illumination dragon lineage was about to rise. 2 illumination dragons carried Long Yi and ran to the back rapidly, preparing to find someone to treat the latter's injuries. The surrounding dragons did not disperse for a long time. Many illumination dragons looked at Su Zimo with reverence in their eyes. At that moment, no illumination dragon jumped out to accuse Su Zimo of being an outsider. There was no illumination dragon to berate him as a bastard with an impure bloodline either. As Long Yin had said, strength reigns supreme in the dragon race. If he wanted to gain the respect and recognition of the dragons here, he could only rely on his own fists. On the central square, the gigantic hidden dragon ranking changed. The 5th line of the hidden dragon ranking, Long Yi, illumination dragon, suddenly moved down. Many dragons would gather in the central square every day. The changes on the hidden dragon ranking attracted the attention of many dragons. The 5th on the hidden dragon ranking has changed? Who defeated Long Yi? Could it be Long Shi? I heard that she just went to the illumination dragon habitat. Just as the dragons were discussing, 4 words appeared on the 5th row of the hidden dragon ranking. Long Imo, illumination dragon. Chapter 1082, Frost Dragon Breath. Chapter 1082, Frost Dragon Breath. Long Imo, the illumination dragon lineage? When did such an impressive person appear? Why haven't I heard of him before? Some people looked confused. Strange, why does this Long Imo sound familiar? The dragons discussed fervently as they pointed at the hidden dragon ranking. Suddenly, a cry sounded from the dragons. I've got it. A dragon said, this Long Imo is the outsider who joined the illumination dragon lineage a month ago. Ah, it's him. I think he just caused a huge ruckus at the mixed dragon side. To think that he would have such combat strength to defeat Long Yi. I heard that the elders of the illumination dragon lineage intend to matchmake him with Long Shi. Long Shi has already charged over. Her nickname is Tyrant Dragon. How can she endure something like that? That Long Imo must be prepared to suffer. Someone gloated. Something's wrong. Right then, a dragon pointed to the hidden dragon ranking and said, Long Shi is ranked 8th on the hidden dragon ranking. That seems to be beneath Long Imo. It was only now that the dragons realized that the hidden dragon ranking had changed. Long Mo's combat strength was even stronger than Long Shi. If that was the case, the consequences of Long Shi charging over would be. The dragons exchanged glances and ran towards the illumination dragon habitat tacitly. After defeating Long Yi, Su Zimo looked at the respectful gazes of the dragons and finally relaxed. This turned out well. It was better than having to fight them one by one. Suppressing the 5th on the hidden dragon ranking could be considered as a permanent solution and save him a lot of trouble. He was about to look for a random dragon and ask where his dragon lair was when he felt a commotion behind him. Where's Long Imo? A loud voice sounded, causing Su Zimo's eardrums to hurt. Normally speaking, the illumination dragon was of the fire attribute, and its habitat had an extremely high temperature. However, at this moment, the surrounding temperature had plummeted. When the surrounding dragons saw who it was, their expressions changed and they retreated instinctively. Frowning, Su Zimo turned around. Not far away, a few dragons charged over with huge strides in an aggressive manner. Their leader was a young woman dressed in tight white robes that accentuated her tall figure perfectly. The woman's face was fair, and her features were well-defined. Combined together, she gave off a unique sense of beauty. However, the twin peaks on her chest were majestic and strikingly glorious. Who is Long Imo? Stand out. When she arrived, the woman suddenly opened her mouth and roared. The woman was definitely a beauty. However, her voice was truly frightening. At the very least, when Suzimo was unprepared for it, he jolted. At that moment, the dragons were scattered all around and Suzimo stood in the middle of the space, looking extremely out of place. The woman shifted her gaze and caught sight of Suzimo right away. She arrived before him in 3 strides. She was half a head taller than Suzimo. Tell me where Longimo is. Upon closer inspection, the woman's eyes were deep and shone brightly like 2 sapphires. Suzimo was secretly troubled. The dragon before him clearly did not belong to the Illumination dragon lineage. Listening to the discussions around him, it seemed like the woman was from the Hornless dragon lineage. He had just arrived at the Dragon Bone Valley and came out of the primordial divine spring. He truly did not know how he got involved with this woman from the Hornless dragon lineage. Suzimo could tell that the woman was hostile. However, he still smiled gently. I'm Longimo. You are. The woman was stunned. A hint of shock flashed through her gem-like eyes and she looked a little dazed. It did not match her fierce expression earlier on. However, the woman reacted very quickly. Clenching her fists, she twisted her neck and said through gritted teeth, "All right, how dare you?" Suzimo was confused. He had no idea what he had done to render that remark. Could Long Yi be the Tao companion of this beauty from the Hornless dragon race? If this was Long Ye's wife, the reason why she came knocking was because he had beaten up her husband. You're Long Ye's Tao companion? Suzimo tried asking. Poof! A stifled laughter sounded from the dragons. Longimo is in trouble now. How dare you tease the tyrant dragon like that? How ferocious! Many dragons revealed gloating expressions. Stop pretending. The Hornless dragon woman ground her pearly white teeth and her eyes seemed to have turned cold as she said icily, "How dare you propose marriage to me, you outsider with an impure bloodline? You must have a death wish." Propose? Suzimo was stunned. He had just come out of the primordial divine spring. How could he have proposed a marriage? Suddenly, the Hornless dragon woman opened her mouth and spat out a white mist at Suzimo. The surrounding temperature plummeted and a layer of frost even formed on the ground. Dragon breath? Every dragon was born with the ability. Of course, different dragon breaths had different strengths. The dragon breath of this Hornless dragon woman was frost. While Suzimo was distracted, the Hornless dragon woman opened her mouth and exhaled. A fragrance wafted over. Immediately after, a layer of frost covered his head, scarlet hair, face, body, and limbs. Thereafter, ice formed at a visible speed. In the blink of an eye, Suzimo had already vanished and a human-shaped ice sculpture appeared on the spot. This is bad. If he's frozen by the tyrant dragon's breath, his organs will be severely injured. He will take at least half a month to recover. The dragons discussed without any sympathy. Humph! The Hornless dragon tapped the ice sculpture before her gently and sneered, "Continue pretending. This is just a taste of the suffering you'll receive." Crack, crack, crack. Suddenly, a series of cracks sounded in the void. The Hornless dragon woman was stunned. Right after, under countless gazes, a crack appeared on the human-shaped ice sculpture and expanded rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the entire ice sculpture was covered. Boom! There was a deafening sound. A figure walked out with surging blood-chi and scarlet hair. He exuded a torrential aura and glared at the Hornless dragon woman with a burning gaze. Pissed! The dragons gasped. He was actually fine after being struck by the frost dragon breath of the Hornless dragon woman. The Hornless dragon woman reacted quickly. Her blood-chi surged and she exuded a cold aura as she charged towards Suzimo. Bang! Although the Hornless dragon woman charged forward rapidly, she rebounded even swifter. She had just charged forward when she was punched back by Suzimo. The Hornless dragon woman rolled on the ground a few times before standing up. Panting slightly, she grit her teeth and said, "How dare you hit me?" Before she could finish her sentence, her vision blurred and a scarlet shadow flashed. She was sent flying once more and landed heavily on the ground with a bang. Roar! The Hornless dragon woman was enraged and roared. A series of crackling sounds came from her body as her body expanded. The woman's clothes burst and silver-white dragon scales appeared on her body, lined tightly like sparkling snowflakes. Chapter 1083, A Huge Misunderstanding. Chapter 1083, A Huge Misunderstanding. As a female paragon of the dragon race, She had a fiery temperament. Coupled with her powerful combat strength, she ran amok in the Dragon Bone Valley and almost no one dared to provoke her. She was about to break through to the Dharma characteristic realm, to think that she would be suppressed by an outsider. Furthermore, this outsider even dared to openly tease her. She did not care about the marriage. Her husband had to be an unprecedented five-clawed divine, dragon like the number one of the heavenly dragon ranking, Brother Long Tsong. How was this outsider worthy? Dragonification. Without hesitation, She transformed into her half-dragon form and prepared to tear the intruder apart. Suzimo did not give She much time to react. He strode forward and reached out with his hand, slapping down heavily on her back. Under normal circumstances, that palm should have landed on Shi's back. However, after transforming into her half-dragon form, Shi's body expanded and elongated. Suzimo's palm was no longer on Shi's back, but her peach-round butt. This change happened in an instant. By the time Suzimo realized it, it was already too late, and he retracted his strength hurriedly. Piak. Although Suzimo had indeed retracted most of his strength, he could not help but slap Shi's, but with a crisp sound. Her flesh trembled. The entire battlefield fell silent instantly. Many dragons were dumbfounded. Heavens, what did Imo do? He's actually spanking the tyrant dragon. Spank? He was clearly fondling it. The dragons roared internally. She had just transformed into a half-dragon when she was struck by this. Instantly, her entire body stiffened and her fair face flushed red. Suzimo sighed internally with a helpless expression. He could even hear Shi grinding her teeth. This was a huge misunderstanding. There was no possibility of an explanation. There was no way he could just tell her that he had spanked her on the butt by accident. Such an explanation would only cause this wild dragoness to go berserk. I'm going to kill you. A few words escaped from the gaps of Shi's teeth. Her tone was cold and the surrounding temperature had already dropped to a freezing point. She had never suffered such humiliation before. Blood chi burst forth from Shi's body as she struggled to stand up and fight Suzimo. Suzimo was thinking about how to deal with the situation before him when he sensed Shi's actions. Before he could retract his palm, he instinctively pressed down. Piak. Shi had just stood up when that hateful palm landed on her butt again. Thump. This time round, she was pinned on the spot and could not move at all. The dragons were in an uproar. Imo had touched it again. You. Shi looked embarrassed. Suzimo cursed internally. He moved his palm and slapped the back of Shi's head, knocking her unconscious. No matter what, he had to knock out the dragoness first. Shi's blood chi gradually calmed down. The silver-white scales on her body gradually faded as well. Her clothes were already torn. With the fading of her dragon scales, her fair skin that shone with a charming luster were naturally revealed. A slender and perfect body was about to be exposed to the dragons. Gulp, gulp. Sounds of gulping could be heard from the dragons. Countless dragons widened their eyes in anticipation. All of a sudden, a set of clothes covered and concealed her perfect body. Ugh! A sigh sounded from the dragons at the same time, looking rather spectacular. It was Suzimo who took out his clothes in time to cover Shi, whose naked body was almost seen by everybody. The dragons glared at him in anger. Although the dragons were pissed about this, they could not bring themselves to say it. Suzimo stood up and looked at the few hornless dragons not far away. He cupped his fists. I'm sorry, I was a little rude earlier on. There must be some misunderstanding here. Please help me take care of this, lady. The few hornless dragons were slightly stunned. They were all dragons and had never heard anyone speak in such a polite manner. When a hornless dragon heard Suzimo's interesting words, he was the first to react and pursed his lips into a smile. Actually, logically speaking, what you did can't be considered rude. That's right, that's right. Another hornless dragon smiled. It's nothing much for you guys to touch one another given your relationship. However, don't do it in front of so many people next time. Hee hee. The other few hornless dragons chuckled as well. Nobody noticed that the blush on Long Shi's face deepened further as she laid motionlessly on the ground. Suzimo rubbed his forehead gently. There was no way he could explain this anymore. We'll be leaving now. The few hornless dragons helped Long Shi up and waved goodbye to Suzimo, their attitudes much better than before. Suzimo was still confused, not understanding how he got involved with this hornless dragon woman. He pondered for a moment and still had no clue. As such, he was prepared to cast this matter aside for the time being and cultivate first. The moment he turned around, a dragon approached him and even gave him a thumbs up. Brother Imo, my name is Long Can. You can call me Akan. The illumination dragon named Long Can was extremely friendly. Brother Imo, I know where your dragon lair is. I'll take you there. All right. Suzimo froze momentarily before nodding. Prior to this, he asked consecutively, but none of the dragons bothered with him. But now, before he could ask, a dragon had already stood out. In the dragon race, strength reigned supreme indeed. Suzimo thought that he had obtained the acknowledgement of the dragons because he defeated Long Yi, who was ranked 5th on the hidden dragon ranking. However, in reality, the true reason why he obtained the acknowledgement of the dragons was because he touched Long Shi's butt. Furthermore, he did it twice. In the eyes of the dragons, this was much more impressive than the hidden dragon ranking. As Suzimo followed Long Can, many dragons around him looked at him with admiration. Some of them even took the initiative to greet and give him a thumbs up. Who was that hornless dragon earlier on? How is she related to me? After a moment, Suzimo could not help but ask. Brother Imo, you really don't know? Longcan asked. When he saw Suzimo shake his head, Longcan explained, Sister, she was initially engaged to Brother Yin before she was born. However, after she grew up, her temper was too explosive and the two of them no longer fancied one another. At that time, they caused a huge ruckus and ended on bad terms. As such, the matter was left unsettled. Long Yin naturally referred to the child of the red-headed ghost. Longkin continued, Brother Imo, the reason why you came to our Illumination Dragon lineage is to replace Brother Yin. As such, the few elders went over to the Hornless Dragon lineage and proposed the marriage. Given Sister Shi's pride, she naturally wouldn't agree to it. That's why she charged over to teach you a lesson. To think that hee. At that point, Longkin winked at Suzimo and smiled. Brother Imo, if you can subdue Sister Shi, the Illumination Dragon lineage will definitely acknowledge you as their young master. Sister, she might have a bad temper, but she's not a bad person. Longkin even put in a good word for Long Shi. When he heard that, Suzimo realized the reason behind things. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. Those old fogies. Initially, this trouble had nothing to do with him. It was the elders of the Illumination Dragon lineage who provoked the Tyrant Dragon by proposing marriage. Chapter 1084, Number 1 of the Hidden Dragon Ranking. Chapter 1084, Number 1 of the Hidden Dragon Ranking. This matter was probably not over yet. Suzimo did not intend to think about it anymore. As long as he returned to his dragon lair, Long Shi wouldn't be able to barge in even if she came knocking again. He asked in a low voice, by the way, where are the cultivation techniques of the Illumination Dragon lineage? I intend to take a look. Follow me. Longkin led Suzimo forward and arrived before a grand hall. After passing through the check by the two guards at the entrance of the hall, the two of them entered. The hall was not big, and there were not many cultivation techniques and secret manuals inside. There weren't even as many as Ethereal Peak. For a race like the Dragon Race, even if they did not cultivate any cultivation techniques, their strength would only increase with age. Cultivation techniques were only supplementary to the dragon race. Suzimo was not interested in the cultivation techniques of the dragon race either. Even the top cultivation techniques of the dragon race could not compare to the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. His only motive for coming here was to crack the mysteries of the Barondermic art in the Yang Spirit section and the Essence Spirit secret skill. Suzimo casually flipped through a few ancient books and his eyes lit up. Bingo! It was just as he had guessed. The ancient and strange symbols in the Barondermic art and Essence Spirit secret skill were actually words of the dragon race. Since Suzimo did not understand the dragon race language, he naturally could not understand the secret behind them. After confirming that, he copied some of the most basic ancient books in the hall and tried to learn the dragon race language as soon as possible to cultivate Baron and the Essence Spirit secret skill. Suzimo left the main hall and bid farewell to Long Kim before returning to his dragon lair to cultivate in seclusion. At the same time, the two battles at the Illumination Dragon habitat spread through the entire Dragon Bone Valley at the fastest speed. Long Yi was ranked 5th on the Hidden Dragon ranking. Normally, his defeat should have been the focus. However, in the following period of time, the dragons discussed the battle between Suzimo and Long Shi. Almost no one cared if Long Yi was ranked 5th or 6th on the Hidden Dragon ranking. The Blue Dragon habitat. What? A blue dragon frowned slightly and said coldly with rage surging in his eyes, "Someone dared to bully Long Shi? Brother Long Yang, I heard that it's the new Long Mo. Not only did he bully Sister Shi, he even spanked her." Another blue dragon whispered. The blue dragon named Long Yang had a slender figure and long green hair. He had a gentle face and exquisite features. Although he was a man, he was even more beautiful than women. If Long Yang were to change into female clothes, he might even draw attention away from Long Shi. He truly doesn't know his limits. Long Yang stood up slowly and walked outside. A gentle look flashed through his eyes as he said in a low voice, "I have to go comfort Sister Long Shi. She's impatient by nature and might explode from anger." Before long, Long Yang arrived at the Hornless Dragon lineages area. The moment he arrived outside Long Shi's residence, he heard a series of low growls. Before long, a few hornless dragons walked out with wretched expressions. They were scolded badly by the enraged Long Shi. "Sister Long Shi, it's me." Long Yang stood outside the cave and said gently, "I heard that someone bullied you. I'm here to see you." Thud, thud, thud. A series of heavy footsteps sounded. Before long, Long Shi's figure appeared in the cave. A bright, bedazzling smile appeared on Long Yang's face. Long Shi glared at Long Yang with bloodshot eyes and gritted her teeth. "Get lost, you sissy." The smile on Long Yang's face froze. There were many hornless dragons roaming around nearby. When they heard that, the hornless dragons grinned and were secretly alarmed. Although Long Yang was a man, he was even more feminine and beautiful than women. Coupled with his gentle voice, many people had bullied him since he was young and called him a sissy. However, later on, no one dared to say those words in front of Long Yang anymore. As Long Yang grew up and endured the humiliation, he cultivated continuously and fought with others. Although he was getting more beautiful, his strength was also getting stronger. Right now, he was already number 1 on the Hidden Dragon ranking. In the Dragon Bone Valley, apart from Long Shi, almost all Void Reversion dragons were taught a lesson by him. This was how Long Shi was like. If it was any other dragon, they would definitely be skinned alive if they dared to say those words. Long Yang was silent for a moment before smiling suddenly. "Sister Long Shi, I know that you're angry. However, don't worry. I'll teach that Longamo a lesson for you." "I don't need you." Long Shi harumphed coldly. "This is my own matter. I'll deal with it myself." "Long Yang, you're even prettier than me. Why are you always pestering me? Don't bother me anymore." Long Shi cursed angrily and turned to enter the cave. Long Yang was not annoyed. He lowered his head slightly and smiled gently, murmuring in a soft voice, "Sister Long Shi, don't be angry. I'll bring Long Mo's head to see you and let you vent your anger." Although Long Yang was smiling, there was a sinister killing intent in his eyes. An outsider with an impure bloodline. Even if he's killed, it's nothing much. He sneered coldly and shook his head before turning to leave. Naturally, Su Zimo, who was cultivating in his own dragon lair, did not know that he had inexplicably made a mortal enemy after just a month in the dragon race. Furthermore, he had yet to meet this person, or rather, even if he knew, he wouldn't care. At that moment, Su Zimo was completely immersed in the young spirit section. When he truly learned the words of the dragon race and looked at the barren dermic art and essence spirit secret skill again, he truly understood the profoundness of that dermic art. He had just truly experienced the terror of the young spirit section. Initially, when Su Zimo released the barren dermic art, it was a huge area with him as the center like a swamp. Be it friend or foe, all living beings in the swamp would be corroded by the barren dermic art. But now, a ball of gray mist appeared in Su Zimo's palm, rolling and changing with a strange aura. The mist seemed to contain the secrets of heaven and earth and the supreme truths of the great Tao. This was the true Baron. It was unbounded and could be changed at will. In the past, even at the center of Baron, the reduction in lifespan was only 100 years a breath. At the edge of Baron, the lifespan reduction was even slower and almost negligible. But now, any living being that came into contact with the mist in Su Zimo's palm would have their lifespans reduced at the rate of 500 years per breath. After comprehending the secret of Baron, it became 5 times stronger than before. This was a qualitative leap. A void reversion had a lifespan of 5,000 years. 500 years in a single breath meant that even void reversions with 5,000 years of lifespan would not be able to last more than 10 breaths under the envelopment of Baron. Su Zimo waved his hand, and the fog dissipated. After comprehending the dragon race's language, the power of Baron increased tremendously, and that was secondary. The true gain was still the essence of the young spirit section, the essence spirit secret skill. Chapter 1085, Settling Once and for All. Chapter 1085, Settling Once and for All. Half a year later. Dragon Bone Valley, Illumination Dragon Habitat. In a dark and warm cave, 2 beams of light suddenly lit up like 2 burning flames. Under the illumination of the 2 flames, the outline of a figure gradually became clearer. It was Su Zimo, who had been in seclusion for half a year. He heaved a sigh of relief, and the flames in his eyes gradually retracted before turning invisible. The entire cave abode returned to darkness once more. He had gained a lot in the past 6 months. It was not only his comprehension of the barren dermic art and essence spirit secret skill, even his illumination dragon eye had changed. Initially, there was an illumination stone in his right eye. However, after half a year of cultivation, the illumination stone had already disappeared. To be precise, it was fused into his right eye. Be it the illumination sword formation or the illumination dragon eye, they were secret skills comprehended through the illumination stone. But now, the 2 secret skills had fused together in Su Zimo's body. The visual technique could no longer be considered as the illumination dragon eye. The power released by the visual technique did not only possess the heat of the illumination dragon eye, it also had the sharpness of the illumination sword formation. The visual technique had become the true illumination eye. Su Zimo stood up slowly. For the past 6 months, he could feel the changes in his body. Without the restriction of the black-haired essence spirit, he was almost no different from any other dragon. He cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness day and night, and his strength rose daily. This was the strength of a dragon. As long as he continued to grow, the power within his body would continue to rise. Coupled with the augmentation of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, Su Zimo's cultivation speed was even faster, and he had almost no bottlenecks at the void reversion realm. Su Zimo wanted to reach the peak of void reversion as soon as possible. At the peak of the void reversion realm, one could receive the baptism of the ancestral dragon divine pillar and enter the Dharma characteristic realm to comprehend the innate divine powers of the dragon race. He would be able to truly protect himself using this true body of the dragon race once he advanced to the Dharma characteristic realm. Of course, there was something else that Su Zimo anticipated within his heart. In his memories, everything from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness ended at the Yang spirit section without any words thereafter. However, he had a feeling that things were not that simple. The mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness originally had 12 demon kings. However, even with the divine dragon included, there were only 8 demon kings revealed in his bloodline phenomenon. In that case, there should still be 4 demon kings that had yet to appear. He wanted to enter the Dharma characteristic realm as soon as possible and see if there was anything left in the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Su Zimo stood up. After half a year of seclusion, he intended to check on Solitary Cloud. The moment he left his lair, he saw many dragons lingering outside. Apart from illumination dragons, there were also some blue, horned, hornless, and winged dragons. He's out. He's out. Hurry and inform Brother Yang. Keep watch here. I'll go right now. When some of the dragons saw Su Zimo leave the lair, they exclaimed softly. Some of them turned and left, disappearing quickly. Su Zimo did not mind and walked towards the habitat of the mixed dragon lineage. Before long, he caught sight of Solitary Cloud. Solitary Cloud had changed even more after half a year. After Solitary Cloud's heart was shattered by Di'in, he had a new heart reconstructed in the primordial divine spring. In reality, the heart was no different from a dragon's heart. Half a year ago, he was bullied by many mixed dragons and did not have time to cultivate. Because of that, the dragon heart could not show its strength either. But now, after half a year of cultivation, his aura had changed drastically and was extremely similar to a dragon's. At the very least, Solitary Cloud no longer felt any pressure in front of flood dragons, rain dragons, and other mixed dragons. Dragon blood was already flowing through his body. He was only missing an opportunity to transform into a dragon. Su Zimo was delighted to see Solitary Cloud undergo such a change. After chatting for a while, Su Zimo stood up and bid farewell. Before long, a group of dragons walked over. The leader of the dragons had a head full of black hair and was extremely beautiful. He was even more beautiful than the Long Shi that Su Zimo had seen before. However, the dragon's gaze was somewhat sinister as he glared at Su Zimo coldly with an unfriendly expression. Here comes trouble. Su Zimo sighed internally. He did not know how this dragoness was related to Long Shi, if she was the latter's elder or younger sister. You're Long Imo? The green-robed blue dragon in the lead blocked Su Zimo's path and asked coldly. Su Zimo nodded. Compared to Long Shi, this female dragon looked much more normal. Her voice was pleasant, and she did not have a loud voice like Long Shi. I'm Long Yang. The green-robed blue dragon said indifferently before pausing, as though he was waiting for Su Zimo to reveal some fear and reverence. Long Yang, number 1 on the hidden dragon ranking. No one in the dragon race would be indifferent to that name. Half a year ago, Su Zimo had chanced upon the hidden dragon ranking. However, for the past half a year, he had been focused on researching the dragon race's language and had long forgotten about the hidden dragon ranking. When he heard the name Long Yang, he was stunned for a moment and was a little lost. Su Zimo pondered for a moment before cupping his fists. Greetings, Miss Long Yang. The moment he said that, the entire place fell silent. The dragons gathered around him widened their mouths and gasped, looking at Su Zimo as though he was a dead man. Although Long Yang was beautiful, he was a man. Everyone in the dragon race knew that this was a taboo for him. In the past, there was a dragon who mocked him in his face and was forced to enter the dragon blood battlefield by him. At the risk of being severely injured, he killed that dragon directly. Ever since then, no one in the dragon race dared to trigger this taboo. But now, Su Zimo's casual remark was equivalent to touching Long Yang's reverse scale. Long Yang's expression turned cold instantly. When Su Zimo saw the reactions of the surrounding dragons, he realized that he might have said something wrong. However, he could not figure out the reason behind it. Since it was a woman before him, Su Zimo did not wish to be entangled with her. He cupped his fists once more and said sincerely, "Miss Long Yang, this is my first time here. If I have somehow offended you, please forgive me." Although he was sincere, his words were extremely piercing to Long Yang. "Cut the crap and head to the Dragon Blood battlefield." Long Yang grit his teeth. "I'll take your life today." Su Zimo frowned. Even now, he was still confused. This was his first time meeting Long Yang. How did it escalate to the point of the Dragon Blood battlefield? According to Uncle Yin, they could fight to the death in the Dragon Blood battlefield. Even if they died, no one would interfere. Long Yang glared at Su Zimo coldly before turning to leave, heading straight for the Dragon Blood battlefield. In the dragon race, unless one was in their own dragon lair, they had no right to refuse a challenge. Su Zimo pondered for a moment and could not figure it out. However, he still followed with a calm expression. He had experienced too many life and death battles. The dragons were excited and headed towards the Dragon Blood battlefield. Passing by the central square, Su Zimo looked up and finally saw Long Yang's name on the first row of the Hidden Dragon ranking. Number 1 of the Hidden Dragon ranking. Su Zimo smiled gently and murmured, "That's good as well. Once and for all, there shouldn't be any more trouble after this battle." Chapter 1086, Suppression. Chapter 1086, Suppression. Sister Shi, Sister Shi. A hornless dragon ran in front of Long Shi and panted slightly. Long Yang went to look for Long Amo, and the two of them are going to fight to the death in the Dragon Blood battlefield. Long Shi's expression changed slightly as she frowned deeply in deep thought. "Sister Shi, this can be considered a good thing. It's Long Mo's fault for bullying you previously," the hornless dragon said in a testing manner. "What do you know?" Long Shi stomped her feet and turned to run over. The news of Long Yang and Long Amo entering the Dragon Blood battlefield spread rapidly throughout the entire Dragon Bone Valley. Almost all the dragons that were not in seclusion ran over to watch the battle. "Who do you guys think will win this battle?" That goes without saying. Long Yang is number 1 on the Hidden Dragon ranking while Long Amo is number 5. Furthermore, I heard that he only just entered the Void Reversion realm. That's right. Rather than asking who will win, it's better to ask how long Long Amo can last. I heard that Long Amo was the one who had a death wish and triggered Long Yang's taboo. Before Long Yang and Long Amo arrived, many dragons were already gathered around the battlefield in a clamor. Before long, the dragons dispersed. Long Yang walked over slowly with a dark expression and ascended the blood-stained Dragon Blood battlefield. Su Zimo followed behind indifferently. The battlefield was vast and reeked of blood. The two of them were in a face-off. "Long Yang, get down. I don't need you to stand up for me." Suddenly, a loud roar sounded from beneath the battlefield. Long Shi appeared and shouted at Long Yang. Long Yang glanced sideways and shook his head. "Sister Long Shi, this has nothing to do with you. Long Amo is the one who has a death wish." "Long Yang, you..." Long Shi was speechless. Under normal circumstances, in theory, she should be happy that Long Yang was standing out to help her teach Long Amo a lesson. Even if Long Amo died, it would have nothing to do with her. However, for some reason, she did not wish for a life and death battle between the two of them. More and more dragons were gathering here. Long Yang said indifferently, "If you have any last wishes, you can say them. I'll complete them for you." Su Zimo burst into laughter and shook his head. "I don't have any last wishes. It's fine as long as you don't disappoint me. I haven't had a chance to stretch my muscles properly since coming here." Arrogant. Those words sounded extremely arrogant to the dragons. A series of boos sounded from the dragons. Many dragons sneered. However, Long Yang did not laugh. He suddenly realized that Long Amo was way too calm. Long Yang retracted his contempt and narrowed his eyes. Suddenly, he exerted strength with both feet and transformed into a green beam of light, charging towards Su Zimo in the blink of an eye. Clang! Clang! Long Yang extended his palm and bent his fingers slightly, flicking out sharp fingernails that shone with a cold glint. A powerful suction force burst forth from the palm and enveloped Su Zimo entirely. Su Zimo was surprised. Long Yang's move was an extremely brilliant melee combat technique. Most dragons relied on their physical bodies to fight in close combat. But now, not only did Long Yang reveal his powerful physique and terrifying burst power, he even released this brilliant melee combat technique. Instantly, he took the advantage. Unhurriedly, Su Zimo twisted his palm into a saber and slashed towards the void not far away. Haha! What's that? Long Imo is already flustered. The dragons below burst into laughter when they saw Su Zimo's move. However, the laughter of the dragons stopped right after. As Su Zimo's palm descended, a gigantic ocean vortex appeared on the battlefield and a series of terrifying explosions sounded, as though it could engulf all living beings within and drown them completely. Vortex stance. Using his palm as a saber, he released the saber intent of the Sea Calming Manual. Long Yang's expression changed slightly. The suction force that burst forth from his palm dissipated instantly against the terrifying vortex and his body swayed unsteadily. Splash! Long Yang roared and released his blood chi, causing the sound of a tsunami to echo from his body. Tsunami blood. It was as though a tsunami had formed within Long Yang's body as well, matching the vortex that surrounded him. Instantly, his figure stabilized. Swoosh! Long Yang's palm continued grabbing towards Su Zimo's face. Su Zimo lamented internally. Up till this point of his cultivation, he had only encountered 2 cultivators in the cultivation world who had cultivated to the realm of tsunami blood. To think that the 2 dragons he had encountered in less than a year after arriving in the dragon race would have reached this realm. Without hesitation, Su Zimo released his blood chi as well. Bang! Boom! Boom! The sound of a tsunami could be heard. Su Zimo strode forward and punched Long Yang's palm fiercely. Bang! Suddenly, the 2 immense forces collided and their blood chi corroded. It was as though 2 gigantic tsunamis had crashed, causing a loud bang. Long Yang's expression changed slightly as he retreated. Su Zimo took a step back as well. This was the first dragon that could force him to take a step back in the Dragonbone Valley. All right. Su Zimo burst into laughter and strode forward once more, charging towards Long Yang. Long Yang frowned. This collision caused his aura to pause, and he could not advance any further. However, Long Imo did not seem to be affected at all. In reality, Su Zimo cultivated the tidal manual and his blood chi surged endlessly like a tsunami wave after wave. There was almost no pause at all. With the help of tidal might, his strength continued to rise. Su Zimo punched out once more with a ferocious might. Long Yang did not evade or dodge. His blood chi burst forth as he countered with a punch. Boom! The 2 fists collided. Su Zimo took another step back. However, Long Yang staggered 3 steps back. Before he could catch his breath, a figure flashed before him and Su Zimo charged forward once more with another punch. Boom! Long Yang retreated once more after receiving the blow. Bang! 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 Su Zimo advanced continuously and rained down punches one after another. His strength rose continuously like a peerless war god with a torrential aura. His attacks were as dense as rain, but they were extremely ferocious and did not give Long Yang any chance to catch his breath. Long Yang could only retreat repeatedly in the face of the attack. His expression turned ugly. He did not even have the strength to retaliate against such an attack. It was impossible for him to retreat, let alone retaliate. Right now, he was completely caught up in Su Zimo's attacks. He could not push forward. However, he could not retreat either. He could only defend continuously until his energy was depleted. This was a vicious cycle, or rather, he would not be able to last till then. A faint taste of blood had already appeared in Long Yang's mouth after the series of head-on collisions. His teeth had already loosened from the shock. The surroundings of the battlefield were dead silent. The dragons were dumbfounded. The scene before them had completely exceeded their expectations. The number one of the hidden dragon ranking, Long Yang from the blue dragon lineage, was suppressed by an outsider with an impure bloodline. Chapter 1087, Absolutely Refreshing. Chapter 1087, Absolutely Refreshing. Long she opened her mouth slightly with disbelief in her eyes. She had experienced Su Zimo's strength before. However, she had not expected that Su Zimo would be able to fight against Long Yang. Long Yang was a blue dragon with a powerful bloodline and was ranked first on the hidden dragon ranking. His combat strength was more than double hers. How could this outsider with an impure bloodline suppress Long Yang? Could it be that this outsider's bloodline was even more powerful and noble than the bloodline of the blue dragon? That was impossible. Long she quickly rejected that thought. The primordial 9 races dominated the ancient world. Within the 9 races, the dragon race's bloodline was superior to all. But how did this person do it? He had only just entered the Void Reversion Realm. What would things be like if he was at greater mastery of the Void Reversion Realm and at his peak? Long she was all too familiar with the dragons in the Dragon Bone Valley, and there was nothing new about them. However, she knew nothing about Su Zimo. Suddenly, she felt an intense curiosity towards Su Zimo. Seems like he has to undergo dragonification. Yes, if this continues, Long Yang will probably be suppressed to death by Long Imo. Transforming into a half-dragon is enough to reverse the situation. The dragons discussed softly. Although Su Zimo had the upper hand on the battlefield, this fight was nothing much in a battle between dragons. It was far from the point of victory, let alone life and death. Roar! Under the suffocating pressure of Su Zimo, Long Yang finally could not take it anymore and let out a dragon roar. A series of crackling sounds came from his body and his figure expanded, bursting through his clothes. Green scales appeared on Long Yang's body with a cold glint. His body rose to a height of 10 feet. His entire body was covered by green scales and was airtight without any openings. His thighs were strong and his feet grew sharp claws that dug deep into the stone platform. Those dragon claws could release even more terrifying power. Long Yang's movement speed had increased significantly. Bang! After transforming into his half-dragon form, Long Yang finally defended against Su Zimo's punch without retreating at all. Long Imo, this battle has just begun. Long Yang sneered and exerted strength with his feet, turning into a green beam of light that charged towards Su Zimo. Good timing. Su Zimo's eyes lit up and he did not take a single step back. With a boom, he activated the Plow Heaven Stride and closed in on the incoming Long Yang. Boom! The two figures collided with a loud bang. The entire void shuddered. Both of them fell out. It was an even split. Pissed. This time round, the dragon's expressions changed slightly. After Long Yang transformed into a half-dragon, his strength, speed, stamina, burst power, and even his defense had an obvious increase. Even so, Long Yang did not gain the upper hand. At that moment, Su Zimo had already pushed his blood chi to its limits. Apart from the fact that he did not use his bloodline phenomenon, he had already released his full strength. His bloodline surged within his body like a tsunami with a terrifying might. Standing on the spot, Su Zimo's scarlet hair danced wildly like a burning flame. With a scorching gaze, he roared with laughter. Awesome! Again. Boom! In a flash, Su Zimo disappeared from the spot. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Long Yang. Bang! The fists collided and the two of them exchanged another blow. This time round, neither of them retreated. The two of them were extremely close as they glared at each other. Relying on their strong physiques, they endured the power that surged into their bodies. There was a momentary pause. All of a sudden, the two of them attacked at the same time, exchanging blows with speed as afterimages of their fists danced. Bang! 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 In the short span of 10 breaths, the two of them exchanged at least 100 blows. The clash of momentum caused flesh and blood to splatter everywhere. It was a shocking sight. Melee combat was the most dangerous. Those 10 breaths were a perfect example of that. No one could guarantee that they would be safe at this distance. Both of them were injured. The only thing they could do was to avoid any fatal damage as much as possible. Although the exchange between the two of them seemed short, in reality, it was a competition of strength, speed, and even stamina. In Long Yang's opinion, he would definitely be able to last till the end with his endless stamina and strong defense after transforming into a half-dragon. However, after 10 breaths, Su Zimo's eyes shone brightly and he fought even more bravely. Long Yang could clearly see the wounds on Su Zimo's body. Although they had not healed, they had already stopped bleeding. What terrifying regeneration powers! Long Yang vaguely realized that if this continued, victory would be unpredictable. Boom! After another clash, Long Yang retreated and panted slightly as he widened the distance between them. The two figures stood still once more. A commotion broke out among the dragons. Both of them were already injured. Su Zimo's scarlet robes were almost torn, and there were many wounds on his body. However, they were not fatal and the wounds were not deep either. Long Yang looked extremely wretched as well. Dozens of dragon scales on his body were struck off and a few wounds were mangled. Long Yang took a deep breath of air and said sternly, "You're very strong and you've already far surpassed my expectations. I've decided to not hold back and give you enough respect. I'll use my strongest methods to kill you here." Su Zimo smiled fearlessly. He was truly satisfied with this battle. Back in the Dao inheritance ground, this body and bloodline could not be used. After that, his body was crippled by the D clan's half-martial ancestor. Ever since he arrived at the Dao inheritance ground, Su Zimo had been suppressing a ball of frustration. Now that it was finally released, he felt extremely refreshed and satisfied. No matter how Long Yang threatened him, Su Zimo did not take it to heart. Although he was slightly injured as well, the situation was still under his control. "Come, let me see what other tricks you have up your sleeves." Su Zimo smiled gently and his blood chi burst forth. He charged forward once more, leaving a series of afterimages behind him. Carrying an apocalyptic aura, he arrived before Long Yang instantly. Boom! He threw out a punch. This was a punch released when one's blood chi was pushed and accumulated to its limits, as though it could reduce all obstacles in front of it to dust. This was also the most terrifying punch that Su Zimo had released since the start of the battle. At the same time, his right eye shone with a bedazzling light that contained an extremely sharp edge like a blazing sun. Visual technique. Boom! A blinding beam of light shot out, as though it could penetrate, burn, and tear everything apart. This was the Illumination Eye that was even more terrifying than the Illumination Dragon Eye. The combination of two ultimate powers was perfect and flawless. In fact, Long Yang could smell the aura of death and his expression changed. Chapter 1088, Divine Dragon Phantom. Chapter 1088, Divine Dragon Phantom. Long Yang did not have time to think as his blood chi surged and his bones underwent a transformation. His initially 10 feet tall body expanded rapidly and elongated. A slender body soared into the skies and spiraled upwards. A complete dragon form. His body was dozens of feet long and was covered in green scales. With 4 claws under its abdomen and horns on his head, his malevolent dragon head swayed and he rose into the air, shuttling through the clouds. It was almost a perfect dragon body. The moment Long Yang transformed into his dragon form, the light of the Illumination Eye descended and landed on the dragon's body. Buzz! The dragon body soared into the skies and the light beam left a massive wound on it, causing blood to flow. More than 10 dragon scales fell and were already charred, filled with sword scars. The dragons were in an uproar when they saw that. Although the threat of a visual technique was not great, it had the advantage of being instantaneous and unexpected. The power of the visual technique itself was far inferior to many dermic arts. Even a powerful visual technique like the Illumination Dragon Eye could not penetrate the defense of a blue dragon's scales and hurt the latter's body. But now, Su Zimo's visual technique almost penetrated Long Yang's dragon body. It was easy to imagine that if Long Yang had not conjured his complete dragon form in time, he would have been half dead. Bang! The blue dragon swiped its tail and collided against Su Zimo's fist. Su Zimo's body shuddered, and he was sent flying. Long Yang's strength was terrifyingly strong in his blue dragon complete form. Su Zimo could not endure it with just his true body of the dragon race and bloodline. The fight between the two of them seemed back and forth. However, in reality, it was Long Yang who suffered a huge loss. He did not make a single sound, but his dragon eyes revealed intense pain. The wounds caused by the illumination eye on his body had a huge impact on him, and they had yet to recover. The blue dragon lineage possessed the most terrifying regeneration capabilities. The searing power of the illumination dragon eye alone could not stop his body from regenerating. However, there was a sharp edge mixed with the wounds that was tearing his flesh apart continuously. It was on par with his regeneration ability. Long Yang shuttled through the clouds while dragon blood dripped from his body continuously. Every single movement caused intense pain to shoot through his wounds. The skies were filled with a shuddering pressure after he transformed into a blue dragon. This was a pressure unique to the dragon race. Any race with inferior bloodlines would be affected by the pressure. The lesser the bloodline, the greater the impact. Su Zimo raised his head and looked at it. His eyes shone brightly, but it was as though he could not sense it at all. Boom! Within the clouds, a malevolent and frightening dragon head suddenly extended and opened its mouth, spitting out a gigantic torrent towards Su Zimo. The torrent descended and formed a bottomless ocean on the battlefield. As a WYRM, Solitary Cloud knew similar dermic arts. However, WYRMS could only reign freely in lakes and swamps at most. As for the dragon race, they were the true dominators who could overturn rivers and oceans. Against that power, Su Zimo was as insignificant as an ant and was engulfed by the tsunami almost instantly. This dermic art was no different from the real ocean. In the face of the power of heaven and earth, any power would be vulnerable. Long Yang circled in midair and released his massive spirit consciousness. His eyes shone brightly as he stared at the surface of the sea, as though he was searching for something. A moment later, he heaved a sigh of relief when there was no movement on the surface of the sea. Roar! Long Yang exclaimed excitedly. Is it over? The same thought flashed through the minds of the dragons as they gazed at the battlefield. To be fair, none of the void reversion dragons in the Dragon Bone Valley could defend against Long Yang's dermic art. However, Long Emo was different. Even when they saw Long Emo being drowned, the dragons still felt uneasy. It seemed like Long Emo would not die so easily. All of a sudden, the initially calm surface of the sea seemed to be stirred by a pair of invisible hands as it began to spin. It was getting faster and faster. A moment later, a gigantic vortex formed in the middle of the ocean. In the center of the vortex, a massive purgatory filled with blood, she floated up slowly with a series of ghastly wails. Break! Su Zimo's voice sounded in the purgatory. The purgatory shattered. A towering corpse mountain appeared and dyed the entire ocean red. Standing on the corpse mountain, Su Zimo was like a god of death in hell that could not be ignored. The combination of the Azura Saber and Sea Calming Manual allowed Su Zimo to escape. Swoosh! Long Yang was enraged and panted heavily, looking down at Su Zimo. All of a sudden, he swooped down and opened his mouth, letting out a terrifying roar from the depths of his throat that shook the world. The roar of a blue dragon. The dragons of the 5 lineages were born able to release this sound domain technique innately. Most human cultivators won't be able to endure the roars of flood and rain dragons, let alone dragons of the 5 lineages. The power of the dragon roar of the 5 lineages was even more terrifying. Even pure-blooded ferocious beasts with weaker strength could be killed instantly. Among the 5 lineages, the blue dragon's roar was the strongest. That was because the strength of the dragon roar was closely related to one's bloodline. Since the blue dragon possessed the strongest bloodline, The power of their dragon roar was naturally the strongest. Suzimo's expression changed. The moment the dragon roar sounded, he felt a sharp pain in his ears. How strong was his body? He cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, and most of the sound domain's secret skills did not affect him much. However, before the roar of the blue dragon could fully erupt, his ears already felt pain. Suzimo immediately realized that he could not defend against the roar of the blue dragon if he remained in this state. If he took it head-on, his eardrums would be pierced. Even his essence spirit could be shaken. Crackle. Suddenly, the sound of Suzimo's bones moving echoed from his body. Shing. His clothes were torn and his body expanded. Scarlet scales grew on his body like red-hot iron plates, emitting a scorching aura. Dragonification. Half-dragon form. In the eyes of the dragons, Long Yang could not suppress Suzimo right away even after transforming into his complete dragon form. That was not right. However, what the dragons did not know was that up till this point of Suzimo's cultivation, the only living being that could force him to this point was the god race leader of the past. Even against Diin, Suzimo did not have to undergo dragonification. After transforming into his half-dragon form, Suzimo's strength, speed, and defense increased as well. The piercing pain in his ears had already dissipated by a lot. However, that was not enough. The roar of the blue dragon had already erupted completely. Suzimo's eyes lit up and his blood chi surged. A lifelike phantom of a divine dragon appeared behind him and spiraled upwards. The man and dragon glared at Long Yang, who was charging over, emitting a shuddering aura and a domineering might. For some reason, Long Yang felt a sense of fear when he was glared at by the man and dragon and instinctively stopped in his tracks. Chapter 1089. Alarming the Elders. Chapter 1089. Alarming the Elders. What is that? Bloodline phenomenon? Long Mo has actually cultivated a bloodline phenomenon. The dragons were shocked. In the Dragonbone Valley, there were at least 20 dragons that had cultivated to the Tsunami Blood Realm. However, there was only one person who could cultivate a bloodline phenomenon. It was the only 5-clawed divine dragon of the blue dragon lineage and the current number 1 of the heavenly dragon ranking, the young master of the blue dragon lineage, Long Tsong. One could imagine how shocked the dragons were now that they saw the bloodline phenomenon on another dragon. Although Long Mo cultivated a bloodline phenomenon, his phenomenon doesn't seem as strong as Long Tsong's. The difference is way too great and can't be compared at all. Long Tsong's bloodline phenomenon is enough to suppress a divine dragon like Long Mo. The dragons were right and wrong. That divine dragon phantom was indeed Suzimo's bloodline phenomenon. However, it was only one of the 8 demon kings. Suzimo did not reveal the full phenomenon. Firstly, Long Yang had not forced him to that point. Secondly, the appearance of 8 demon kings was way too shocking. Furthermore, a blood-colored butterfly would appear after the 8 demon kings. A dragon said in a deep voice, "That may be the case, but even the weakest bloodline phenomenon is extremely powerful and cannot be underestimated." Long Mo has already taken on his half-dragon form. If he were to take on his full dragon form, Long Yang would most likely be doomed. Impossible. Another dragon shook his head. Long Mo's bloodline is impure. Transforming into a half-dragon is his limit. The dragon was right. Right now, Suzimo could only take on a half-dragon form at most, and he could not even take on a complete dragon form for some unknown reason. However, even in his half-dragon form, it was enough for him to sweep through everything. The power of the blue dragon's roar was completely released. Standing on the spot, Suzimo suddenly opened his mouth with a burning gaze. The divine dragon behind him opened its mouth at the same time as well. The actions of the man and dragon were synchronized without any difference. Suddenly, a roar that shook the world exploded. Heaven and earth shook and the weather changed. Roar. It clashed head-on with a dragon roar. The power released by the 2 dragon roars collided in midair. The entire world seemed to have gone silent. Instantly, complete silence ensued. That loud bang had extinguished all sound. However, every single dragon felt their hearts tremble. Yes, Long Yang's body shuddered, and he suddenly grunted with a pale expression. The dragons were moved. Everyone knew that the blue dragon's roar was the strongest sound domain power of the 5 dragon lineages. However, Long Yang was the one disadvantaged after the collision of the 2 dragon roars. What did that mean? Could it be that Long Mo's bloodline was even stronger than the bloodline of the blue dragon? Disbelief appeared on the dragons' faces. All of a sudden, Su Zimo rose from the ground and took advantage of the moment when Long Yang's body shuddered. Leaping up, he pushed aside the clouds and rode on Long Yang's neck. Long Yang was enraged. Being ridden on the neck was an immense humiliation for the dragon race. No one could ride above him. The dignity of the dragon race could not be trampled. Su Zimo did not care. His legs were strong, and he gripped Long Yang's neck tightly. Raising his fist, he smashed down on Long Yang's head. Bang! There was a deafening sound. Long Yang lamented. Su Zimo's punch was enough to turn divine weapons into dust. However, it did not manage to knock Long Yang's head open. It was clear how strong the blue dragon's physique was. However, Long Yang's head was also mangled by the punch. Roar! Long Yang roared furiously with bloodshot eyes. His entire body rumbled continuously and burst forth with a twisted power. Even though Su Zimo's legs were clamped tightly around Long Yang's neck, he was almost flung into the air. Su Zimo reached out hurriedly and gripped Long Yang's dragon horns tightly to steady himself. However, Long Yang's body did not show any signs of stopping as he rolled, shuttled, circled, and spun in midair. As for Su Zimo, he exerted strength in both his hands and legs and could only stabilize himself. However, he could not free himself to continue attacking. Both parties were in a strange stalemate. Of course, if nothing went wrong, such a stalemate would consume a lot of Long Yang's stamina. If this continued, his defeat was inevitable. Long Emo made a huge mistake. That's right. The horn of a blue dragon contains many offensive dermic formulation techniques and the essence of one's strength. Long Emo must have a death wish for grabbing a blue dragon's horn. The dragons watched coldly from the sidelines and naturally saw everything more clearly. While they were discussing, Long Yang's dragon horn suddenly turned red like a burning iron rod and the temperature rose continuously. Su Zimo focused his gaze. This should have been a dermic formulation of the Illumination Dragon lineage, but Long Yang was able to control it with ease. Normally, if anyone else were to continue holding the horns of the blue dragon, their palms would be burned to ashes. If they let go, they would naturally be flung down. However, the one riding on Long Yang's neck was Su Zimo. This counterattack was of no threat to him at all. Firstly, his right hand was the divine phoenix bone. Even if his flesh was burned to ashes, the bones of his right hand would not be damaged. Secondly, Su Zimo would not hold on to the dragon horns foolishly. He had a trump card as well. All right, I'll let you try the power of Baron. Sneering coldly, Su Zimo's eyes lit up and he conjured hand seals secretly. Suddenly, 2 balls of gray mist appeared in his palms. The 2 gray mists wrapped around the scarlet dragon horns and isolated the high temperature. Su Zimo was still gripping the horn of the blue dragon tightly with his palm intact. This Long Mo actually has a way to deal with it as well. There is truly always someone stronger. I'm afraid it's hard to say who will win between the 2 of them. What sort of dermic art is that gray mist? It doesn't seem to have much power no matter how I look at it. Many dragons frowned slightly with confusion in their eyes. On the surface, the power of Baron was merely to isolate the heat of the blue dragon horns. However, in reality, Baron had already taken effect on Long Yang. Long Yang's lifespan was decreasing at a rate of 500 years with a single breath. In the blink of an eye, Long Yang's lifespan had been reduced by more than 5,000 years after 10 breaths. Normally speaking, void reversions only had a lifespan of 5,000 years. As for the dragon race, they were one of the primordial 9 races, and once ruled over the primordial era. Their bloodline was strong, and they were different from humans. Although the reproduction rate of the dragon race was extremely low, they had a long lifespan. Even without cultivating, they had a lifespan of tens of thousands, or even 100,000 years. As for human cultivators, they could only live for 100,000 years after reaching the Mahayana realm. That was the difference between them. Therefore, Long Yang, who possessed longevity, did not notice anything unusual after the descent of Baron. The first to realize that something was amiss was not Long Yang, but the many elders of the dragon race who were watching from the shadows. On the surface, this was a life and death battle between two dragons. However, it had already alarmed the elders of the 5 lineages. Chapter 1090, Reverse Scale of a Dragon. Chapter 1090, Reverse Scale of a Dragon. In a corner not far away from the dragon blood battlefield, 5 blurry figures stood, watching the battle silently as though they were in another dimension. Even if the dragons passed by this place, they would not be able to see them. The 5 figures were elders from the 5 lineages of the dragon race. From the Illumination Dragon, Elder 4 was the one who came to watch the battle. Does the Illumination Dragon lineage really intend to let this child be the young master? The Horned Dragon Elder frowned slightly and sounded doubtful. The Winged Dragon Elder shook his head as well. That lad's combat strength is not weak. However, his bloodline is impure and his potential is limited. He's not worth nurturing. Regarding the matter of elders of the Illumination Dragon lineage, sending Su Zimo and Solitary Cloud into the primordial divine spring to recuperate, the other elders of the dragon race were still somewhat displeased. Elder 4 of the Illumination Dragon lineage merely smiled. Continue watching. As time passed, the elders gradually revealed a hint of surprise. To think that this lad's combat strength would reach such a level. This is somewhat beyond my expectations. His bloodline is impure, and he can't transform into a complete dragon body. That's not a big problem. Once he cultivates to the perfected void reversion realm and receives the baptism of the ancestral dragon divine pillar, he should be able to transform. The elders of the 5 lineages commented and chatted. As the battle progressed, the elders' attitude towards Su Zimo changed as well. After 2 breaths of Baron, the hornless dragon elder smiled. Interesting. This lad actually possesses the power to weaken one's lifespan. 500 years in a single breath is enough to deal with lesser races. However, it's useless against us dragons. The elder of the blue dragon lineage had a relaxed expression and did not seem to mind. After 7 breaths, Illumination Dragon Elder 4 said with a grim expression, "Something's wrong." The other 4 elders exchanged glances and noticed something amiss as well. The Horned Dragon Elder narrowed his eyes and said sternly, "The power of this dermic art to reduce one's lifespan is irreversible." Although dermic arts that targeted longevity were extremely rare and precious, they were not completely non-existent. However, the power of those dermic arts could be recovered. Simply put, while the shaving of 500 years of lifespan would be present while the dermic art was released, the lifespan would recover upon the end of the dermic art. However, Baron was different. Shaving 500 years of lifespan was equivalent to losing 500 years. It was irreversible and irrecoverable. That was way too terrifying. Nobody would complain about having a long life. Imagine how terrifying it was for a high-spirited and elegant youth to have his lifespan cut by 70 years to become an old man on the brink of death. Even dragons with long lifespans could not remain indifferent after their lifespans were cut by thousands of years. As elders, they should not interfere in a life and death battle between the younger generation of the dragon race. However, Long Yang was the number 1 of the hidden dragon ranking. Furthermore, Su Zimo was an outsider with an impure bloodline who had joined the dragon race for less than half a year. They would naturally be biased towards the latter emotionally. The blue dragon elder frowned, and his figure flashed as he walked out of the void. The other 4 followed hurriedly. "Old Shu, it's not good for you to interfere in the fight between juniors, right? The dragon race has never broken this rule before, Elder 4 of the Illumination Dragon lineage frowned. The Blue Dragon Elder was hesitant as well. Right then, the expressions of the 5 Dragon Elders changed at the same time. They were initially in the void and could not sense it. It was only when they arrived outside that they could clearly sense the terror of Baron. The power of this dermic art ignores one's cultivation realm. The hornless Dragon Elder widened his eyes in disbelief. I think so. The Horned Dragon Elder's expression changed gradually as he nodded. This meant that if the dermic art descended on them, their lifespans would decrease at a rate of 500 years a breath as well. Of course, given their combat strength, they could kill Su Zimo within a single breath. Even so, that dermic art was enough to shock the world. The Winged Dragon Elder said meaningfully, Long Imo has truly given us too many surprises. At that moment, 10 breaths had passed since Su Zimo released the barren dermic art. A resolute look flashed through the eyes of the Blue Dragon Elder as he prepared to strike. If this continued, even if Long Yang did not die, the Blue Dragon lineage would still lose a paragon if too much of the latter's lifespan was depleted. Suddenly, a change happened on the battlefield. Su Zimo, who initially had the upper hand, leaped down from Long Yang's body. He dispersed the gray fog with both hands and stood at the other end of the battlefield with a calm expression. He had stopped. Su Zimo, who initially had the upper hand, did not force a kill. He chose to stop at the right time. Although losing 5,000 years of lifespan was a significant loss for Long Yang, it was not fatal. This was a lesson and a warning. After Su Zimo stopped, the Blue Dragon Elder who had just stepped out retraced his step as well and heaved a sigh of relief. In the Dragon Blood battlefield, Su Zimo looked at Long Yang with a calm gaze. The outcome of this battle was decided. Or rather, life and death were decided. If he continued to cast Baron, Long Yang would have no other choice but to die with his lifespan exhausted. He was not a bloodthirsty person to begin with and had no deep feud with Long Yang. There was no reason for him to kill the latter. Losing 5,000 years of lifespan was enough as a lesson. Long Yang hovered in midair motionlessly and glared at Su Zimo with a complicated expression. His eyes no longer carried the anger they had initially. He could naturally sense that Su Zimo had shown mercy. However, he would not admit defeat. He was more prideful than anyone in his bones. Long Imo, don't think that you can make me bow down and acknowledge defeat just because you stopped. Long Yang pursed his lips with a stubborn expression. Gritting his teeth, he said, I still have one more move. I haven't lost yet. The dragons were shocked and could sense Long Yang's determination to die. He was truly willing to fight to the death. Long Yang, stop. Long she could not help but shout. Long Yang shook his head and looked at Su Zimo, saying slowly, Long Imo, take this. Essence Spirit Secret Skill, Blue Dragon's Fury. Before Long Yang could finish his sentence, green light burst forth from his glabella. A towering green divine dragon with a single horn broke out of his body. Opening its bloody mouth, it charged towards Su Zimo with a ferocious expression. The dragons felt their hearts clench. Essence Spirit Fight. Success or failure depended on this move. To the dragons, Su Zimo had joined the Dragonbone Valley for less than a year and had yet to cultivate the dragon race's essence spirit secret skills. Against that move, Su Zimo was most likely doomed. However, on the battlefield, Su Zimo's expression was calm as he looked at the incoming green dragon. His glabella shone and his massive spirit consciousness compressed continuously. A palm-sized scarlet scale slowly floated out from his glabella. It looked very ordinary. Compared to Long Yang's Blue Dragon's Fury, it was nothing special. It was only a dragon scale. It was the reverse scale of a dragon. Chapter 1091, Recognition. Chapter 1091, Recognition. The mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, the essence spirit secret skill of the Yang spirit section. It was also the essence of the Yang spirit section. The reverse scale was a scale in the shape of a crescent beneath the neck of a dragon. Once touched, it would definitely incur the wrath of the dragon race. That was the reason why there was a saying throughout history. Anyone who touched the reverse scale of a dragon would die. That statement was also the obscurity of the essence spirit secret skill. The Scarlet Reverse Scale in midair did not have to enter Long Yang's consciousness to kill him if it came into contact with his essence spirit. As long as Long Yang's Blue Dragon's fury collided against the reverse scale, his essence spirit would be destroyed even if it was dozens of feet away. That was the terror of reverse scales. He could not touch that reverse scale at all. A single touch meant death. Throughout history, there had never been an essence spirit secret skill that possessed such domineering power. Although the dragons could not sense the descent of the reverse scale, Long Yang felt his scalp tingle and a chill run down his spine. A feeling surfaced in his heart. It was as though he would die the next moment. At the same time, the elders of the 5 lineages watching from afar were shocked as well. Given their cultivation realms, they could naturally sense the terrifying aura emanating from the reverse scale. The green divine dragon in midair looked majestic and powerful with a torrential aura. However, it was way too inferior compared to the reverse scale. The 2 essence spirit secret skills exploded and collided instantly. Even if the elders of the 5 lineages were to step in, it would be too late. Long Yang is finished. The same thought flashed through the minds of the elders of the 5 lineages. The blue dragon elder's eyes were filled with regret. He should have stepped in when Long Emo showed mercy earlier on. If he had stood out in time, this terrifying killing move would not have descended and Long Yang would not die either. Long Emo could not be blamed for this. In a life and death battle, it was only right for Long Emo to kill Long Yang. Furthermore, Long Emo had already stopped before this. Perhaps that's just Long Yang's fate. The blue dragon elder sighed internally. Although the fight between essence spirits sounded slow, it happened in an instant. In midair, the malevolent green divine dragon collided against the reverse scale and its entire body froze in midair. Right after, in front of everyone, cracks appeared on the green dragon's body. The reverse scale was intact. Not far away, Long Yang's expression froze on his face. His gaze was dazed and gradually dimmed. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. If he persisted, although his essence spirit would be shaken, Long Yang would definitely die. However, there was really no need for that. With a single thought, Su Zimo dispersed his reverse scale. In midair, the green divine dragon did not last long before it turned into specks of light that dissipated into the world. Long Yang closed his eyes and his massive body fell from midair. With a loud bang, he crashed onto the battlefield, causing dust to fly everywhere. Su Zimo sighed softly. Long Yang was not dead. However, his essence spirit was already filled with cracks. Thankfully, Su Zimo retracted his attack in time. If the reverse scale had existed for a moment longer, Long Yang might have been destroyed in both spirit and body. The elders of the 5 lineages heaved a sigh of relief when they sensed the changes. The blue dragon elder was delighted. On the battlefield, Long Yang's life force was almost negligible and could barely be sensed. The dragons did not know about Long Yang's situation and thought that he was dead. The dragons were in an uproar. Some were furious, some were shocked, some were sorrowful, and some were stunned on the spot. In the eyes of the dragons, Long Yang was already at the perfected void reversion realm. Even though a fight between essence spirits was dangerous, there was no way he would die. But now, he was lying motionlessly on the ground without any signs of life. Long Yang had died in battle. Many dragons charged into the battlefield. Some of the blue dragons had bloodshot eyes and sorrowful expressions. A blue dragon turned around and glared at Su Zimo, shouting, "Long Emo, I'm challenging you to a life and death battle right here in the Dragon Blood battlefield. Let me. Long Emo, I challenge you." Another blue dragon stood out. "What are you guys doing?" Long Can of the Illumination Dragon lineage stood beside Su Zimo hurriedly and shouted. This was a life and death battle between the two of them. "You can't blame Brother Emo." "Fine, let's fight then. Do you think that the Illumination Dragon lineage is afraid of you guys?" Another illumination dragon shouted. "Everyone, quiet down." Long she roared. However, her voice was quickly drowned in the noisy battlefield. Emotions were rife, and a huge fight between the dragons was about to break out in the dragon blood battlefield in the blink of an eye. "What are you guys doing?" Right then, an authoritative voice suddenly sounded in midair and entered the ears of every dragon, containing a powerful might. The dragons were shocked and looked over. 5 figures stood in midair, emitting powerful auras with immense pressure. Under the suppression of this pressure, the hot blood of the dragons gradually calmed down. The elders of the 5 lineages descended. "What's the ruckus? Are there no rules now?" The blue dragon elder looked around with a sharp gaze. None of the dragons dared to meet his eyes. "Elder, that outsider killed Brother Yang." Finally, a blue dragon could not help but lament with reddened eyes. Everything in the dragon blood battlefield is a life and death battle to begin with. If you're afraid of death, don't come here. The blue dragon elder said coldly. But the blue dragon was still indignant. He was of the same lineage as Long Yang to begin with, and was naturally extremely close to the latter. In his eyes, Su Zimo, someone of the Illumination Dragon lineage with an impure bloodline and had just arrived in the Dragon Bone Valley for less than a year, was just an outsider. No buts. The blue dragon elder shook his head. This is a rule of the dragon race. It's unquestionable. After a brief pause, the blue dragon elder looked deeply at Su Zimo and said slowly, "Furthermore, Long Yang isn't dead yet." Everyone was stunned the moment his sentence was finished. Long Yang was not dead. Under normal circumstances, even if his essence spirit did not die immediately after receiving such injuries, he would not be able to salvage it. However, the Dragon Bone Valley possessed the primordial divine spring that could revive the dead as well as regenerate flesh and bones. The blue dragon elder waved his sleeves and released a burst of dermic powers. Long Yang's gigantic body transformed into a human. The gaze of the blue dragon elder landed on Su Zimo and paused for a moment. He nodded to the latter before leaving with Long Yang. Although the blue dragon elder said nothing, the fact that he nodded his head was already rare. He was expressing gratitude to Su Zimo. The essence spirit fight earlier happened in an instant. Although the dragons did not know what happened exactly, the elders of the 5 lineages of the dragon race could sense it. If Su Zimo had not held back, Long Yang would have died by now. This battle not only established Su Zimo's status among the younger generation of the dragon race, he had also truly obtained the recognition of many dragon elders. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.